When while pondering the very meaning of life, our hero desperately dodges a deadly arrow aimed straight at him, completely exhausted after running for his life. A sudden realization hits him: life is honestly just like a hard-boiled egg, just as the sharp arrowhead pierces his leg, causing him to instantly stumble, but his reflections on that bizarre boiled egg metaphor still occupy his mind as his exhausted body. Flat on the freezing dirt, he still desperately tries to crawl away. No escape. Realizing the futility, he slowly turns to face them, meeting the eyes of the ruthless commander towering over him with a sharp blade. Total silence. Knowing any further struggle is completely useless, he simply waits. Arnak watches helplessly as the enemy leader smugly orders his greedy men to search their defeated prey, when suddenly an excited subordinate lets out a loud shout about finding a valuable artifact, shattering the tense quiet of their final confrontation. The relic is instantly snatched away by the greedy leader, leaving our protagonist pinned to the ground and held tightly by two sturdy guards. Finding comfort in the fact that he fought until his very last breath, he calmly watches the heavy blade swing down on him, just like a game over screen. Inside his head, a dark voice screams for blood, demanding non-stop murder. He silently begs his demanding mother of decay that dying here is unnecessary. Suddenly, a strange greenish aura wraps around him. The goddess continues her unrelenting cries for carnage, ignoring his warnings that the stolen relic is divine. No mercy, the executioner brings down his blade, off with his head. The severed head of our hero rolls right into the commander's shocked hands. Holding his own decapitated head, Marnek calmly starts to explain his master plan. He details exactly why he had to lose his head to shake off his pursuers. With total composure, he just pops the severed head right back onto his shoulders. Back together, flesh and bone instantly bind, and he laughs in relief. He survived, even as the bloody mother of decay keeps screaming for more slaughter. He remembers approaching 30, feeling completely burned out by the daily grind. Back then, gaming was his only escape from a truly boring reality. He started using cheats to skip the grind, which leads to this moment. He bought a game solely to play a highly specialized priest of corruption. Everyone said it was a trash tier class, incredibly weak and hard to unlock. Still, he studied those weird stats very closely. Just reading the class description made him highly excited. He exhaled heavily, unable to resist the urge to try this bizarre build. Finally completing the grueling class quests, all his hard-earned materials suddenly vanished. Right then, bizarre glitches and strange anomalies erupted across his screen. Pure chaos, the standard game interface begins to distort and warp. Leaning in closer to inspect the glitches, he freezes. He recoils, a blinding, mysterious light floods the entire room. His keyboard sharply flies straight up as an unknown force drags him forward. Pulled inside, sucked into the monitor, he plunges down the dark abyss. He has been reincarnated inside the game as the priest of decay. A mummified hand screams for blood in a terrifying voice, beating his chest. Yet his calm smile reveals he is actually loving every second of this madness. Mother of Spoil, 5 years ago, his journey began when he woke up inside a glowing ritual circle. He wore only Spoil Order robes, surrounded by strange, glowing symbols. An otherworldly summoning, her mystical hand rested right against his chest. The physical proof of his eternal, unbreakable service. That connection made things pretty easy. He accepted his sudden displacement into this game world surprisingly fast. There was no going back, but he quickly adapted to these system laws. Honestly, looking back, accepting this madness so easily just makes him chuckle. He just laughs at the memory of his initial shock and painful realization. In this world's lore, a spoil priest is an alchemically modified human. He possesses supernatural abilities and enhanced senses far beyond any ordinary mortal. His inhuman stamina lets him recover from deadly wounds. Even decapitation is basically just a minor, annoying inconvenience now. But those irreversible changes in his brain structure soon caused another realization. He looks ahead at a bloody scene, completely surprised by his own reaction. He used to hate the sight of blood. Now, that fear is completely gone. Now he calmly watches a wild beast rip a fresh corpse to shreds. Standing there, completely unfazed by the gore, proves he is no longer normal. His mind has been rewired, turning a regular guy into a servant of darkness. Still, his only real loss is something pretty tragic: his sense of taste. Nostalgic cravings for hot pork brisket and spicy kimchi still haunt him. After getting his official priest certificate under the name Marek, he thanks the staff. Stepping out of the crowded, busy administration building, he looks for work. But when he asks a female clerk for a job, she looks incredibly confused. She stares at him in surprise, clearly not used to such weird requests. Shaking off her shock, she quickly realizes she has to find him a quest. Instead, she frantically searches her papers for tasks meant for support order priests. Waiting with a patient smile, he is already thinking of how easily he will trick everyone. Introducing himself as a priest of the support order is a brilliant, calculated move. This clever lie lets him slide into the northern city of Giz completely undetected. While this keeps the hostile locals off his back, this masquerade is incredibly risky. If the real gods get angry, they will brand him with a visible mark of judgment. Any true believer would see that mark instantly, exposing him on the spot. Getting caught means brutal retribution from the real holy factions. But fortunately, the mother of spoil is surprisingly tolerant of his games. This strange divine leniency gives her faithful follower a massive, unfair advantage. Hated by literally every faction, the Order of Spoil is forced to hide its true face. They serve a terrifying goddess perched atop a mountain of skeletons, radiating power. A sinister aura of absolute death surrounds her. He stands in total awe before her. He watches the emerald glow of the goddess's hand, gently lifting his chin. Suddenly, a triumphant cheer from the clerk breaks his trance. She found a task. She immediately hands the quest document over to her quiet petitioner. Accepting the paper, the priest's friendly mask slips for a brief second, unwittingly showing the dark truth hidden beneath his peaceful facade, showing his raw, calculating nature behind the gentle disguise of support. A casual joke about the mercenaries being illiterate brings back a carefree smile. He carefully hides his local writing skills, which only appeared after his transport. His bold request for a cash advance leaves the clerk completely flabbergasted. The clerk isn't used to such insolence from passive support priests. With horses and wagons packed tight, the squad is ready to move. The entire mercenary group heads out into the rugged mountains. Clueless about what lies ahead, the young priest smiles at the silent demands. Meanwhile, the administrator gets pretty defensive after receiving his sudden warning. He was warned of a heavy fine for any tardiness tomorrow. But the violent urges throbbing from his bandaged hand force him to stay quiet. He does his best to ignore the goddess's absurdly flirtatious hints. Suddenly, someone calls his name, dragging him right out of his thoughts. He turns around, barely hiding his annoyance at the sudden intrusion. A handsome, blue-eyed rookie named Pierre approaches the priest with curiosity. Pierre starts chatting about his family waiting in the next village. Barely remembering the kid's name, the priest is pretty annoyed by the rambling. He hears about the captain's kindness and Pierre's aging parents. Pierre even shares some creepy rumors about ghosts raiding local farms. Thankfully, a loud shout from the captain cuts the monologue short. Pierre grins, promising they will finish their little chat later. But the goddess's bloodlust returns, making him internally protest. Killing his innocent travel companions would only cause massive problems. Leaning forward, the priest begs his hand to postpone the massacre until Giz. He explains they need local silversmiths to winter there comfortably. Straightening up, the priest feels a sudden, sweet wave of relief. The intense divine pressure finally stops completely. He quickly apologizes to his companion, continuing on with a lighter step. But wait, the peace is ruined as his bandaged hand creeps out again. All 5 fingers pop out, demanding death in a pretty clear gesture. Hoping to redirect her focus, he asks her a sudden question. He wants to see how the squad ranks on her divine scale. The hand retreats under his cloak, but the mother of spoils acts. She immediately marks each mercenary with bent fingers so he can judge them. To his disappointment, every potential sacrifice is incredibly mediocre. The sacrificial system is simple, with each finger meaning a 10-fold jump. Scaling from 10 to 100,000, 10,000 is the mark. This magic threshold grants the cult follower a powerful, supernatural ability. He remembers the rush of absorbing his very first holy relic. Now he needs 12 more legendary artifacts to unlock his true potential. As Pierre reports back, he recalls the dark goddess's ultimate promise. She promised to grant any wish if he harvests every single religion. The simple hope of regaining his lost sense of taste makes him drool. He licks his lips, already dreaming of delicious, legendary feasts. But Pierre breaks his daydream, passing along a warning from the captain. Hearing this sudden demand not to interfere leaves the young priest stunned. His gaze is a silent question, quoting a quick joke about the limits of human patience. Pierre rubs the back of his neck in pure embarrassment, looking totally guilty. He looks guiltily at his new friend, who just smiles back warmly. He assures his companion that everything is fine, completely hiding his real motives. It is a perfect mask of friendliness, but then total chaos. Pierre and Priest Marek open their eyes to an absolute nightmare. Black arrows rain down, already tearing through the flesh of their allies. Pierre lets out a sharp gasp, horrified by the sudden bloodbath around them. Before he can move, a violent jerk from behind pulls him completely off balance. Hands grab his clothes with insane force as Marek takes action. Marek grabs Pierre, hurls him backward out of danger, and launches himself forward. He charges straight into the volley. Multiple arrows slam deep into his chest. The agony is instant. His veins bulge as a ragged scream tears from his throat. His teeth grind together in a brutal grimace. Pierre scrambles up in pure shock. Desperately, he reaches out for the falling body of the man who just saved him. He screams out, completely helpless to stop his friend from collapsing. Bodies pile up near the carriage as the cold-blooded archers track their prey. Hidden deep in the brush, the invisible killers keep firing without mercy. Hit by several shafts, the priest collapses right beside a carriage wheel. His dark blood quickly stains the pristine white snow around him. He lies completely still, while the raiders shout to finish everyone off. But his mind is racing. The plan is simple: play dead. Let them think they won, wait for the bandits to close the distance. He steals a glance. The ground is littered with arrow-ridden corpses. A horrific testament to a perfect ambush, but Marek slowly stands back up. Muttering about how easy this prey is, his eyes lock onto a fallen sword. The perfect weapon, he grabs the hilt in one fluid motion. With a heavy swing, he readies his own brutal combat style. The blade slices the air as he prepares to unleash absolute carnage. Raising the sword high, he explodes forward with terrifying speed. He charges like a literal god of death straight at his stunned attackers. The hidden archer in the bushes completely freezes in pure terror. His mouth hangs wide open. He cannot believe what he is seeing right now. The corpse he just shot is sprinting straight toward him like a demon. Suddenly, Marek drives the blade right through his own body, spraying dark blood. A heavy grunt escapes his lips as he unleashes a savage battle cry. The bandits behind the trees freeze, utterly paralyzed by this insane sight. Now watch, even their leader is completely stunned by what is unfolding. A scarred thug bares his teeth, sensing the sheer danger of this priest. Realizing this is going to be a bloodbath, he barks orders. He tells his men to finish off the survivors immediately. He marks the priest as his own target, calling for backup. Marek pulls the bloody sword from his own flesh, taking a stance. The furious leader leaps at him, but Marek blocks the strike easily. With insane power, the priest shoves the massive bandit leader right back. Standing just meters away, completely motionless with a terrifying lack of effort. Thrusting his weaponized hand forward, the young priest quickly muttered a strange question. He asked a cryptic question, checking his opponent's rank on a mysterious scale. Hearing the scrap of that bizarre question, the approaching enemy broke into laughter. He jeered demonically, questioning the boy's bizarre words. Then their weapons clashed in a blinding storm of strikes and parries, with neither fighter gaining the upper hand in the struggle. Backing away after another clash, the priest finally got a response from his bandaged hand, revealing 2.5 fingers beneath his clothes. That signaled his enemy's raw power, comparing this thug to the assassin who once slit his throat. The youth cursed this unbalanced game world. He gripped his weapon with tighter, more desperate resolve as suddenly a deflected strike snapped the very tip of his sword off. The broken steel spun into the snow, leaving his defenses completely shattered. Seeing the broken blade, the bandit leader began to howl with laughter, completely gloating over what now looked like an incredibly easy victory. The young priest stared down at his ruined blade with a heavy, regretful sigh. Meanwhile, his enemy kept bragging about the sheer power of his frost steel blade. But then the bandit leader unexpectedly offered to let the priest walk away. This sudden proposal left the young fighter looking completely bewildered. The leader explained it was his final warning before he cleared out. He grimaced, looking exactly like an exhausted bandit pushed to his limits. He offered a peaceful exit, urging both sides to walk away. Hearing this, the young priest slowly let go of his grip. allowing his shattered blade to drop straight into the deep snow at his feet. But his counteroffer for the bandits to retire sounded dead serious, making the leader stare suspiciously at the unarmed priest. The boy offered a warm, friendly smile, promising zero trouble, which felt incredibly out of place given their brutal standoff. The bandit leader scoffed, deeply skeptical of this bizarre peaceful offer, mocking the boy for expecting ruthless outlaws to just play nice. The Merrick priest started to reply with a gentle smile, but his words were violently cut short as a stray arrow pierced his head. He fell dead instantly. From the trees, a cold voice spat a cynical comment about talking too much, prompting loud jeers from the bandit crew. The leader turned to his men as the young priest's body collapsed into the cold snow. One of the bandits muttered in awe about the shattered sword, and the leader immediately started bragging about his supposedly calculated attack. He hid his sheer luck, quickly turning to discuss the other travelers. He confidently claimed his men had completely wiped them all out. But then a sudden voice spoke up, questioning that very claim. The entire bandit gang froze on the spot in superstitious terror. Looking as if they had seen a ghost, a sudden shout from behind forced the smug leader, now completely pale with panic, to spin around in absolute dread to face his worst nightmare. Slowly rising, a sickening green light bled from his skin. He whispered about how impossible it was that he still breathed. He casually yanked a bloody, jagged arrow right out of his skull. The priest kept talking, mocking them with his miraculous survival. "What's wrong?" he asked, staring right at them. Their eyes filled with absolute horror as they froze in place. No screams, he brought up the mercy they ignored. Crossing his arms, he let the pale green light flare up brighter. He smiled, their dark doom was already set. Sensing doom, the leader panicked and screamed a desperate order. "Fire," he yelled, pointing a shaking hand at the monstrous priest. His archers quickly lined up, letting loose a volley of arrows. The shafts tore through his flesh, but he did not fall. Eyes closed, arms crossed, he just stood there waiting patiently. Quietly, he prayed to the mother of spoils, admitting his own weakness. The bandits watched in sheer terror as their attacks did nothing. Mouths hanging open, they stared at this terrifying, unkillable monster. Too much, desperate screams soon filled the clearing. "Fall back," the leader shrieked, sending his men into a wild stampede. They ran, but they hit something unseen. Imagine running for your life, only to slam face first into solid magic. Every path was blocked, a boundary line no living soul could cross. This was the real, terrifying power of the spoiled priest finally breaking free. The massive wall pulsed with a divine power they could never break. A dark smirk spread, he softly thanked his goddess. He whispered his gratitude to the mother of spoils for keeping her promise. Realizing they were trapped, the desperate leader told his men to draw steel. They pulled their weapons while others kept hitting the glass wall. The captain tried to command them, but the words died in his throat. He froze, completely blind to the nightmare unfolding right behind him. He was too busy screaming orders to hear his men panic. The raw terror in their voices made him turn around slowly. Some of his warriors shielded their faces, completely giving up on the fight. And then a pure nightmare, a giant beast materialized. It was a multi-limbed creature, pulsing with pure, violent muscle. A single massive claw slammed down, splintering the earth beneath them. The violent shockwave sent the bandits flying, crashing hard into the dirt. Too terrified to even run, they just stared up at the creature. "What was it?" they whimpered in fear. One of them could only choke out a single word: monster. His pale face twisted in absolute horror at the sight of it. The beast tilted its massive head back toward the open sky. A loud screech, it easily sealed their terrible fate. Complete panic took over as they frantically beat against the barrier. They clawed at the wall as the giant beast slowly closed in. They cowered weeping, covered in snot and completely broken, they begged. Desperate, screaming for mercy, the bandits promised to reform their lives. Marek casually let his parasite feed, he didn't care at all. Only the victims' heads remained intact, the slaughter was over in seconds. The priest stood completely alone now, among a pile of mutilated corpses. The mother of decay demanded her spoils, she wanted her divinity. Marek refused, explaining how suspicious it would look if the bodies vanished. But suddenly, something strange caught the young priest's attention. He whirled around, surprise interrupted his deep, quiet contemplation. He froze as his gaze fell directly onto Pierre's motionless body. An arrow was sticking straight out of his heart. It looked fatal. He immediately assessed the situation. He had to make a choice. Marek announced he would save the boy. It would boost his reputation. The mother of Decay protested constantly from beneath his heavy bandages. Kneeling beside the blond man, Marek inspected his severe wounds. The young priest begged his parasitic goddess to help stop the bleeding. Marek pleaded with her to save him, desperate to prevent his death. Far away, a blue-haired priestess holding a recovered relic pondered the thief's fate. Her companions smugly confirmed that the daring thief had already been executed. The culprit was beheaded on the spot, exactly as they originally planned. When she asked about the body, he admitted they had no chance to retrieve his remains from the chaotic scene. They only recovered the holy artifact, prompting the silent priestess to turn away. She coldly told her companion to head back first. Her eyes locked onto the relic resting on the table. Then she made a sudden announcement. She was going on a pilgrimage. Her words were dead serious. She didn't even look at her stunned companion, who was completely shocked by this sudden decision. The man stammered out a question, his face twisted in utter confusion. He immediately suspected this drastic change was connected to the prophecy. The priestess slowly turned to face him, silently confirming his suspicion. She admitted he was right. There was someone she had to meet. Her gaze fixed on the floor, keeping her true motives hidden. Meanwhile, Priest Marek was struggling to drag Pierre's heavy body over his shoulder, determined to save the blond man's life. He pushed through the immense weight and stumbled onward, after dragging the wounded boy to the village entrance. Marek met two startled guards. They stared at the bizarre, bloody sight with wide, shocked eyes. Realizing what was happening, the guards rushed over to take Pierre's heavy body and ease the burden. Just then, a sudden voice called out, making the young priest turn around to see who was calling. A familiar girl stood before him, having already cleared his entry. She teased him, pointing out that his slender frame didn't match the ridiculous superhuman strength he had just displayed. Marek simply smiled modestly, brushing off her sudden compliments. Daisha quickly realizes his unusual strength, keeping quiet so nobody notices. She avoids pointing out his abnormal power, but then she spots the bag. Instantly remembering the source of the trouble, she leans in closer. She inspects the gruesome contents with professional curiosity and offers to take them. Reaching her hands out, she asks to deliver the evidence to the guild. Marek hands over the bloody burden without a single thought. Traveling together, Daisha asks him where he plans to spend the night. He casually answers that there are plenty of places in the big city. Hearing he has no real plan, Daisha offers her own place. The sudden invitation comes with a clear spark of personal interest. A deep blush gives away the boy's sheer embarrassment. He acts cool, completely ignoring the mother of corruption's demands for bloodshed. Later, lying in bed, the young priest patiently talks to the mother. He explains he had no dirty motives for accepting the red-haired girl's invite. Still, the dark goddess silently demands blood and murder. He keeps explaining it is just a normal night in a guild guest room. Yet he can't help but smile, remembering the hostess's cute expressions. Suddenly, the door crack reveals the silhouette of someone he knows. A polite greeting immediately cuts off the young priest's cozy daydreaming. Apologizing for the early wake-up call, she says there is trouble. Something urgent needs his attention. She remains politely in the hallway. She waits patiently outside, respecting his personal space. Yawning and rubbing the back of his head, Marek gets out of bed. He asks what the rush is just as the door swings open. Wait, the Lord actually summoned him. Now things are getting interesting. The bandaged hand, still writing her favorite word, quickly slips under the blanket. She stays hidden as the mention of the Lord jolts him awake. Suddenly, sleep is completely gone, because you do not keep a Lord waiting. He searches her face, silently waiting for some kind of explanation. A brief pause follows before she explains who the Lord actually is. He is the half-brother of Captain Galed, connecting everything in a tragic way. Quickly dressing, Marek heads out toward the majestic estate. He wonders why the Lord has such sudden interest in him. An assistant guides him through the manor, leading him straight into the office. He is formally introduced to the Lord as the priest awaiting an audience. With a brief nod, the Lord dismisses the servant. The servant bows respectfully and leaves, shutting the door behind him. The Lord Treadmillion sits back in his chair and silently studies Marnak. His piercing eyes inspect every single detail of the unusual guest. He asks about his brother's final moments in a freezing tone. The icy question sends a chill down Marnak's spine. Danger is close. Just then, the mother draws a big X on his hand as a warning. Marnak instantly understands her signal and shifts his entire approach. A bright, polite smile suddenly covers the young priest's face. He looks up boldly, acting completely innocent to hide his true powers. He saw right through the Lord, and the demon's sudden confusion betrayed his. Shock, he never expected a mere low-status visitor to so easily expose his true demonic nature. Meanwhile, the mother of spoil artifact in his pocket drew a warning X at the sight of the Lord, which was instantly understood by the clever priest. Only one kind of non-living being could take human form, and those were demons, ancient entities wielding immeasurable, dark power, terrifying, red-eyed creatures whose gazes concealed dark, ancient secrets. This mysterious race made even the most experienced priests tremble in fear. Though superior in sheer strength, demons faced heavy limits on their physical actions, forcing them to find clever loopholes to achieve their dark goals. To manifest in the material world, they had to sign complex contracts with living hosts, creating a tight web of dangerous, binding obligations. This exact need drew them to mortal beings who could offer physical vessel to anchor them. Naturally, the gods despised demons for their strict law of equal exchange, where every single gift demanded an equal price. In return, thus, the divine rulers decreed a harsh new commandment to all creation, declaring that all demons were absolute evil, meant to be hunted down. Soon, holy priests began a ruthless crusade, turning this ancient race into hated outcasts with no right to exist. Smiling, the young priest recalled that in the game, the demon follower class was considered incredibly difficult, prompting almost every player to avoid it. But check this out, his hidden memories were priceless, since this was the second class he had mastered. During his past virtual adventures, quietly he continued to stand right before the Silent Lord's massive desk, keeping his eyes on the floor. As he waited for a response, suddenly a low laugh broke the heavy silence, with the demon appreciating the sheer value of Gilead's ultimate sacrifice, which had delivered such an intriguing guest right to his doorstep. Admiring his visitor's sharp insight, the Lord readily admitted his disguise was compromised, introducing himself as Creeping Expectation, a name that commanded absolute dread. In return, the young man introduced himself as a priest of the Mother of Spoil, using the alias Marak to speak on equal terms with this ancient entity. The demon was genuinely surprised to hear this, as he believed the Order of Spoil had been completely wiped out long ago. Leaning back in his chair, he realized he needed to reassess the entire situation, offering him a seat while emphasizing the absolute secrecy of their meeting. Marak sat down, quietly trying to read his host's true motives and goals. The Lord's blunt admission that he had no specific reason for the summons caught him off guard, earning a highly skeptical look. The demon's smile vanished, replaced by an intense, cold seriousness as he demanded to know the truth about his brother, who led the mercenary group during that ill-fated mission. The Lord's promise to pay him handsomely for his help caused an immediate shift in the young priest's expression, who quickly agreed to share info. Mentally, he laughed at the absurd irony. His younger brother had desperately complained about having zero work in winter, so the Lord hired his band without ever realizing the fatal consequences. Pondering the consequences, the young man weighed the deadly outcome. He watched Treadon walk over to the window, standing with his back turned to hide his raw grief. He hid his pain. Watching him, Marak realized how complex life really is. He watched Philin intently, drowning in guilt. He blamed himself for her death. Meanwhile, the boy counted his gold coins. He carefully handed the heavy gold pouch right back to him, deeply appreciating the gesture. It was a massive, incredibly generous reward just for giving simple information. He saw no greed, only a desperate need to find his brother. He pocketed the pouch, trusting his sincerity. Rejecting greed, he silently reasoned that gold lasts for an absolute eternity. But the Mother of Spoils was absolutely furious, screaming with unbridled rage from his bandaged hand. Once she calmed down, he wondered what could outlast gold. What else in this incredibly fragile world was truly immune to rot and decay? Squeezing her hand tightly, the young man softly whispered his confession of eternal, undying love. He gently stroked the bandage, showing tender affection. Touched by this, the deity instantly stopped demanding murder. She snuggled contentedly right against her follower's chest. He promised to put his deity first and keep her safe. Filled with a new understanding, he leisurely continued his long journey. A friend's sudden greeting instantly triggered her urge to kill. The hand reacted immediately to another presence. His friend offered to introduce him to the famous Order of Enlightenment. Marek looked completely surprised, never expecting a meeting under these conditions. He internally groaned with pure disgust at these fanatics. He closed his eyes, instantly sinking deep into the dark, heavy silence of his thoughts. But watch closely, his gaze suddenly locks on them. Mother of Spoils immediately sensed something highly unusual about these strangers. One of the new arrivals carried a sacred relic on him, which instantly triggered the divine deity's rage. The companion's sudden spike of intense anger flooded straight into her loyal follower. One of the newcomers greeted them, expressing surprise at seeing a priest. He approached Marek, who froze in shock. The stranger solemnly introduced himself, a pendulum of righteous retribution. His name was Orvis, arrogant pride in his eyes. Orvis gestured toward a giant comrade who was standing right behind him. The giant standing right behind him had an unusual horn on his head, named Cornu. Next, Orvis pointed to the quiet girl in their group. Her name was Patina, and she gave a very polite, respectful nod. Marek quickly smiled and introduced himself as a priest. He claimed to serve the goddess of support, making a polite, formal bow. Nearby, the clerk watched them introduce themselves, dreaming of being close to him. She stared at the priest with starry eyes. Inside, Marek breathed a massive sigh of relief. This meant he could avoid immediate danger now and steal the relic later. But absorbing the relic would release her power. This would immediately expose his dark, hidden secret. Stealing it sounds pretty tempting, but memories of brutal bandits make him hesitate. If he did this, he would just be another common thief. Suddenly, Orvis drops a massive bomb. He must meet with the Lord. This unexpected twist leaves his companion completely stunned. Caught off guard, they suggest saving the rest of this talk for later. The group turns to leave, leaving Marek alone to wonder about this mysterious meeting. Before he can dwell on it, a woman's voice breaks his train of thought. She mentions the guild tradition of offering cheap shelter to visiting priests. This nominal fee reveals the real motive behind her earlier invitation. Realizing why she invited him over yesterday brings a smile to his face. She smiles back, confirming that his sudden realization is spot on. But any hope of personal interest vanishes when she explains her professional duties. Knowing it is just business brings Marek some pretty obvious relief. He tries to defend himself, but a nervous red blush gives him away. Sweat drops show his panic as she reaches out her hand. She gently asks for a blessing of preservation. She is a bit skeptical about his actual skills. So he leans in and whispers that blessing food keeps it from spoiling too quickly. She edges a bit closer so nobody else can overhear their conversation. Suddenly, Marek yelps and jumps backward as a terrifying realization hits. The mother of spoil already hates her, and close contact will only make things worse. She just sits back down, casually watching his embarrassed reaction. She does not explain herself, leaving him flustered until a serious voice speaks up. A voice comments on their moment, making the young priest startle. He spins around in complete surprise, letting out a confused gasp. Seeing a familiar face, Marek wonders why this man did not travel with the others. The giant priest of Cornu explains why he stayed behind. He explains that the northern lords are incredibly prejudiced against people of his origin. He had no real choice in the matter, so he politely said goodbye. After they left, he waited outside before coming back. Now he is back to keep this talk going. The girl suddenly chimes in, saying Lord Triton does not care about prejudices. This bold claim gets a surprised look from both priests. While the Lord is notoriously cold, she insists he is exceptionally fair to everyone. This thought brings a soft smile and a gentle chuckle. She explains how he separates duty from personal matters and keeps order in Giza. Ending her speech, she shows them a silhouette of a man named Fayan. Promising to remember this, the giant priest steps forward. He approaches her desk to show just how seriously he takes this. His sudden move is deliberate, wanting to ask a very specific question. The giant eagerly asks for any other critical details. Hearing this intense request makes both of them laugh quietly. After a brief pause, the young priest speaks up to ask a question. He asks his new companion what the real purpose of their meeting is. He admits he is following a prophecy from 10 years ago. Looking down at the silent young man, the giant continued his tale. The giant explained Orvis's grim warning about the fast-approaching end of the world. A terrifying demon was apparently hiding beneath a living shell, ready to strike. Our hero asked if they truly believed the Lord was a demon. The horned giant shook his head, delivering a very sharp denial. He clarified they were just investigating anyone who seemed suspicious. His comrades were already inside Triton's office taking action. Orvis's consecrated relic, which he always carried, could detect any hidden demon. This sacred tool was their secret weapon, and it did not fail them. It revealed Master Giz's real face, a twisted, furious mess of demonic rage. Pure chaos erupted. Seconds later, a massive explosion shook the city. The entire building shattered, collapsing into a heap of rubble and dust. Unlocked demonic power tore through the streets as the beast emerged. Now the ancient horror is completely loose, and believe me, nobody is safe. Hearing the deafening sounds of destruction outside, the young man froze. He realized the truth. Extreme danger was already right on their doorstep. Yelling out his holy battle cry, Priest Orvis raised his glowing weapon. The heavy mace began to shine with an intense, pulsing blue light. Cursing the wicked beast, the priest prepared to unleash a devastating strike. He launched a stream of burning divine light directly into the monster's face. The giant, enraged demon took the hit head-on as the priest roared. He claimed this was his hammer of punishment, swinging through the thick smoke. Cornu rushed outside only to find the entire battlefield buried in dust. Seeing the distant battle raging with the demon, he knew he had to help. Shouting for them to hold on, Priest Marek suddenly ran past him. But instead of helping his allies, the priest fled in the complete opposite direction. Cornu stared after him, utterly stunned by the man's shocking cowardice. Nearby, a terrified clerk screamed out, trying to understand what was happening. Suddenly, our hero kicked a door open, bursting back into the room. He shouted a question, demanding to know where Pierre was. He looked up and spotted a familiar girl sitting quietly at her desk. Quickly running up to her, he scooped her into his arms with a dead serious expression. He demanded she tell him exactly where Pierre was being treated so he could find him. The girl was completely dazed, but that was nothing compared to her next shock. Without a word, the young man leaped straight out the window with her. They practically glided through the air before landing smoothly on the ground. He immediately sprinted forward, moving with a supernatural burst of inhuman speed. The girl clung to him, completely bewildered as the city fell into chaos. All around them, desperate cries for help echoed through the smoky streets. Terrified citizens were screaming, shoving each other out of the way to escape. They were frantically running from the demon in its true, horrifying form. The red-haired girl looked over and finally realized what was happening. With pure terror in her voice, she screamed out to warn the priest. She kept shouting about the massive beast currently destroying their city. She watched in horror as a single swipe of its paw leveled an entire building. He got it all, but something else was gnawing at him. Shouting over her panic, he demanded she forget the demon and find Pierre. The clerk snapped out of it, pointing toward a nearby building. Still carrying her in his arms, he bolted straight for the entrance. And look at that inside, the room was completely quiet. He slept peacefully, totally oblivious to the absolute chaos tearing the city apart. Seeing him safe let both of them breathe a massive sigh of relief. Especially Priest Marek, who looked on warmly, refusing to let the boy die. But knowing the hefty priest could never outrun this on his own. The young man had only one option, throwing him over his shoulder. It was heavy, but he managed. Right then, he caught the clerk's eye. She just stared back in utter shock, completely lost on what she should do next. The young man told her to hold on tight, since carrying two. In his arms was physically impossible. He gestured for her to wrap her arms tightly around his neck, and she did so with blushing cheeks. With both of them secured, the young man took a deep breath. Moving with inhuman speed, he burst forward, carrying both survivors on his back. As they sped through the streets, the clerk yelled directly into his ear. She knew a secret passage out of here, which immediately got his attention. Without stopping, he checked his pace and looked back over his shoulder. He shouted over the wind, demanding to know where the passage was. Her response was instant, pointing her finger toward a small door nearby. She warned him it was locked, but a locked door was no obstacle. Sprinting up to the building, he lowered his stance and prepared to strike. With a violent kick, he threw all of his strength into the wood. The clerk held her breath, never expecting him to actually shatter it. But splinters and wood fragments went flying right past her eyes, before she could even gasp in amazement at his raw, terrifying strength. They were already standing safely inside the cabin with the secret exit. Setting her down, he told her to run if things got worse. Her relief vanished instantly when she asked what he planned to do next. Briefly explaining that he had to go back, he left Priest Marek safe. He turned around and dashed back toward the danger, leaving her behind. She screamed for him to stop, but her cries went totally unanswered. The young man was already sprinting back into the heart of battle. She wanted to yell more, but she knew it was completely useless. In just a split second, he had vanished far out of sight. There was no way he could hear her screams within minutes. He was already back at the place he had just fled from. But wait, as he approached the battlefield, a horrific sight froze him. He screamed out the name of his fallen comrade in pure horror. Dropping to his knees beside the heavily wounded horned giant, he yelled. He desperately tried to shake his dying friend back to consciousness. Covered in blood, the giant slowly cracked open his single working eye. He weakly looked at the boy, muttering something about Priest Marek. He bitterly realized it. The wounds were just too deep for help. Leaving Korna behind filled his heart with a fierce, burning rage. He roared in anger, "Where are the other priests?" Hearing that Patina was already dead confirmed there was no rescue. The sheer scale of this tragedy was finally sinking in. He begged the dying giant for any way to defeat the beast. With a weak gasp, Korna spoke of a white sword. Orvis had plunged that sacred relic straight into the raging demon's head. This was their only hope. They had to reach that sword. Drive it deep into the brain. That was his last advice. The giant died. Marek offered a prayer to the mother of spoil. He sat by the corpse, begging her to accept the soul. Suddenly, he realized he had gained 100 units of divinity. Meanwhile, the last priest, Orvis, was screaming out in absolute agony. Severely wounded, he desperately tried to land another strike on the demon. Yelling about retribution, he swung his hammer at the embedded sword. The weapon was already sticking right out of the creature's skull. Despising the pain, the demon thrashed its massive head around violently. It screeched, a deafening howl tore from its massive maw. Watching this, Marek realized this was his one and only chance. He gripped his weapon, leaped forward, and flew toward the beast. Landing squarely on top, he felt a brief surge of pride. But that target, the white sword, was still quite a distance away. He stood there planning his next move when something felt wrong. Sensing immediate danger, he quickly looked around to find the threat. The demon's body was beginning to warp strangely. Red spots appeared, armored husks peeled off, and massive spikes erupted. The creature roared, its jaws open wide as the danger surged. It thrashed violently, tossing off absolutely everything in its way. Marek couldn't hold on. He was violently thrown into the air. He hurtled toward the ground, barely realizing what had just happened. Slamming hard, he hit the jagged debris of the ruined building. Covered in blood, he lay there gasping heavily from the impact. The mother of spoil started screaming in his head, demanding murder. Marek snapped his eyes open, trying to calm her raging voice. He told her he was fine, then slowly rolled onto his back. Spreading his arms, he muttered about her favorite saying about streaks. How there is always a bright white line after the dark. Suddenly, a faint glow off to the side caught his sudden attention. Turning his head, Marek smiled at the beautiful surprise waiting there. He grabbed the glowing relic, pressing it against his bandaged arm. With deep relief, he whispered an invocation to the mother of spoil. He begged the sacred relic to grant him fresh, deadly power. His smile vanished. He was completely serious and ready for action. Urgently, he called on the mother of spoil to break the seal. He watches the relic in his hand begin to glow green, sparking the power activation. Sent flying upside down, he remembers that each relic only unlocks a single new ability. The divine energy stored inside them is strictly limited, offering just one shot at power. Another seal shatters at 11,723 divinity. Marek spots his precious find sitting on the ground, surrounded by ruined glass and rubble. Still pinned to the floor of the ruined building, he demands answers from his bandaged hand. He wants to know what kind of bizarre gift he received, but there is no explanation. Kill, that is all the creepy bandaged hand keeps repeating. Before he can even gasp in surprise, the mother of spoils suddenly leaps out from his clothes. She scurries forward, forcing him to shift his gaze and follow her quick movements. Lying on the ground, he can only watch as she runs further and further away. Marech wonders out loud if a deity so far away can actually support an entire religion. But the hand is practically ecstatic, thrilled by her sudden growth. It climbs up the tallest rock around, screaming its endless demands to kill. This is no time for games. He stuffs the bandaged hand back under his coat to regain full control. Closing his eyes to focus, the young priest begins to concentrate deeply. Green magic wraps around his body as he formally invokes the mother of spoils. Offering up 10,000 divinity, he feels himself lift off the ground slightly. He recoils as a glowing white sphere suddenly erupts directly out of his chest. Pleading for a new ability, Marech watches the orb grow larger and larger. Brilliant white light explodes outward, filling the entire area with blinding rays. As the spoil text ability unlocks, a mystical runic circle forms behind his back. Strange symbols glow softly, confirming that his ritual was a complete success. The power is incredible, but the sheer exhaustion on his face is hard to ignore. Activating the spoil text covers his hands in glowing, dark green mystical tattoos. These magical markings hum with raw energy, promising a massive boost in strength. The patterns spread across his entire skin, glowing dimly to prepare him for battle. His physical stats skyrocket, fully prepping him for the upcoming trials. Praising the mother of spoils for this awesome power, Marech slowly starts to stand up. This power is crucial, especially since his broken legs are finally healing. He puts weight on them, amazed to find the bones have knit back together. Standing with growing confidence, he no longer feels that agonizing, crippling pain. As he stands up, his eyes catch something nearby, and trust me, it is not good. Looking closely, he senses a strange, powerful aura coming from the object. He gasps softly, unable to tear his eyes away from a strange sword. The blade is buried deep in the earth, angled in a very bizarre way. Right next to it lies the body of Priest Orvis, whom he instantly recognizes. Staring at the familiar robes, tears start welling up in Marech's eyes. He pieces together the tragic scene, remembering how they fell off the demon earlier. The impact shattered Marech's limbs, but he somehow managed to survive. But poor Orvis was not so lucky, taking injuries that were immediately fatal. Whispering a quiet prayer for his soul, Marech turns to the mother of spoils. He offers up the priest's body to her, a soft green glow surrounding the corpse. The ritual begins, but the colossal threat they faced is far from gone. The beast is still alive, howling fiercely as its crimson eyes burn with an intense thirst for revenge, and it is not just screaming either. The monster is actively crushing and smashing absolutely everything in its path, which immediately catches the attention of the young priest watching from afar, turning his gaze with a touch of sadness. Marech is quite surprised by how deeply those priests of the Enlightenment order managed to anger this demon. But even after their deaths, the beast remains in an absolute, unstoppable rage, smashing everything in sight, just pure mindless chaos. Marech gets the 1000 divinity notice and wonders how this kind of demon can control itself instead of just acting on primal instinct. Still, maintaining his calm expression, a brilliant and completely crazy idea suddenly hits him. An insanely powerful idea, it completely overrides his careful strategy. His face turns dead serious as tattoos cover his body, true confidence shines in his eyes, warning the mother of decay of upcoming chaos and the need to hold on tight. In a flash, he leaps onto the rooftop, bolting forward at high speed, directly toward the massive, rampaging beast. The young priest slams down onto the pavement with such incredible force that the hard concrete beneath his boots instantly shatters to pieces. With zero hesitation, he leaps. He lands right on the demon, who is actually fast enough to spot him coming, but our hero holds on tight, scrambling higher up the monster's back, even as its tail whips wildly around, trying to shake him off. A sharp cry for the white sword leaves his mouth, and finally, the target he has been chasing is right there, within reach. Determined and knowing the end of this battle is within reach, the young priest charges ahead, pushing his body to the absolute limit. He runs at full speed, but suddenly notices something familiar about the way the giant demon begins to coil its massive body. It is preparing to roll over and crush its annoying attacker. Exactly what he wanted, Marech makes one final powerful leap. to make absolutely sure everything goes to plan, muttering that the exact same trick won't work on him twice, leaping down. Marek sprints away, narrowly avoiding the beast as it violently rolls over. Another colossal explosion erupts in the exact same spot, obliterating several surrounding buildings and filling the entire area with blinding smoke and dust. The sheer shockwave sends debris flying, forcing the nearby priest to suddenly cough up blood, failing to even muffle it with his hand. Staring down at the dark, fresh blood pooling in his palm, Marek realizes the decay is spreading far quicker than he originally expected. Meanwhile, the giant demon lies motionless on the shattered ground, seemingly resting. With its mouth closed, it senses no danger, knowing that using his cursed decay power is rapidly rotting his body from the inside out. Time is running out. Marek quickly runs and leaps once more. This leap launches him directly to the creature's muzzle, letting him spot the legendary white sword. He grabs the hilt, ready to. Priest Cornu once told him he had to drive the blade deep. To pierce the demon's brain, the young man whispers a final sentence of death. A cold grin, he does not push the sword in. Instead, he pulls it out, blood drips, and as he stares at the wound, Marek speaks an awakening spell. He calls to Lord Tedden. Trapped in that beastly shell, the demon once felt completely invincible. But now everything shifts. His body is literally starting to fade away. Right before his eyes, sudden, blinding light erupts from a series of massive explosions. It leaves the townspeople absolutely frozen in shock. The clerk watching Week peer inside the emergency cabin is no exception. She hears a strange sound and quickly whips her head around. Unable to see anything, she stands up and peers through the broken door. Far off in the distance, she spots that exact same glow. Where that massive monster once stood, there is now only a bloody, ordinary man collapsed on the ground. After whispering those words of awakening, our protagonist steps closer to the fallen figure. Observing his condition, Master Giza can barely even look up at his savior. He admits meeting him is a blessing beyond his hopes. With a laugh and a grin, our protagonist mutters that the giant blade in his head seems to be seriously overpowering his sanity. Pointing to the weapon, he asks if those 2 gold coins were actually worth it, watching as the man looks up at him and slightly tilts his head, but he remains completely silent for a moment. Then Filion finally speaks up. They more than paid for themselves, and with that, without hesitation, he grabs Marek's hand and pulls himself up. Meanwhile, the blue-haired priestess raises her hand, conjuring a tiny blue sphere of magic in her palm. She is ready to unleash her power. Pushing the orb forward, she completely clears away the heavy snow to reveal the bare, frozen earth underneath. The scarred man standing beside her can only watch in absolute awe, muttering his endless amazement at her strength. Then he notices something highly unusual. There is no corpse at the exact spot where he beheaded the kid. The bandit leader lowers his head in frustration, realizing he made a massive mistake. He clearly remembers how stood right here, swung his sword back, and delivered that final fatal blow. He quickly shrugs it off, assuming local monsters must have dragged the remains away. The priestess quietly nods, agreeing with his theory and thanking him for the safe escort, but then she makes another request. Catching him completely off guard, looking directly into his eyes, she calmly asks him to name all the surrounding towns so she can plan her next move. Meanwhile, our hero walks through the ruined streets of the city, accompanied by the same clerk who originally brought him to Mr. Treaton. Leading the boy back to a familiar hall, the helpful guide rushes ahead to swing the door wide open, bowing deeply to let Marek pass. Inside, a man leaps out of his chair, shouting a warm welcome to the priest. He has been eagerly waiting for this guest to arrive in his office. Tradden Filion smiled. The young priest looked better with every passing day. He felt awkward. Still, Marek offered his sincere thanks for the compliment. Tradden laughed softly. Words could never fully express his immense gratitude to him. Marek was their legendary demon slayer, but the young priest had a question. If that demon is still alive, who did he actually kill back then? Tradden answered simply, even vile monsters have a powerful will to survive. Marek nodded along. Inside, however, his mind instantly drifted to the past. He remembered everything, the chaotic battle and its heavy, lingering consequences. Once the dust settled, Tradden loudly proclaimed Marek as their great savior. He told everyone the priest saved Giza's master from a gruesome death. The lie felt dirty, but the glorious title stuck to him anyway. Honestly, calling him a demon slayer only brought him constant, deep discomfort. Erin absolutely loved it. She teased him in public whenever she got the chance. She loved the attention. He, on the other hand, absolutely hated it. Standing there, he felt incredibly awkward, hearing two citizens whispering behind him. They were eagerly discussing the famous demon killer, talking up his power. He looked weak, but they whispered he once defeated 7 bandits alone. The surrounding crowd didn't even try to hide their noisy chatter anymore. They closed in. They muttered that slaying a demon made bandits look easy. Slaying a demon meant ordinary bandits were absolutely nothing to him. Onlookers watched the exhausted priest finally flee from the overwhelming gossip. Later over tea, Marich noted how smoothly Traden's wooden limbs moved. It was incredibly strange. It immediately prompted a surprising confession. Traden admitted he only walks normally here, while limping in front of others. The nobleman pointed to his feet, intentionally showing off the clever trick. Raising his wooden arm, he hinted at the steep price he paid. Such effortless movement required a pretty heavy, highly mysterious sacrifice. Marich felt annoyed, realizing this dramatic acting was just a theatrical play. Taking a slow sip of tea, Traden finally began to explain. Eventually, the hair across his entire body would weaken and drop like autumn leaves. Looking up at the young priest, Traden added a rather shocking detail. In a few months, get this, he would be completely, utterly bald. Seeing the priest's horrified, almost tearful expression, Traden quickly changed the subject. He asked if Marich had a free week, receiving a quiet nod. He then explained a specific job request meant only for him. The sudden offer made the young priest question the reasoning behind it. Apparently, the clients heard the legendary demon slayer stories and made their decision. They believed he was the perfect man for the job, Traden explained quite seriously. When Marich realized the job involved sacred relics, his interest was instantly sparked. These remnants of the ancient empire were simply too tempting to ignore. The priest's face completely changed, tuning out everything else around him. He didn't even hear about the massive 5 gold coin reward. Lost in thought, the priest listened as Traden promised serious research help. Traden watched him closely. The grand offer even allowed him to claim one sacred relic for himself. Having so many options to choose from was what ultimately made his decision. Just then his bandaged hands started acting up again, screaming for blood. It was a pretty familiar soundtrack to the young priest's constant mental battle, but with the mother of spoilage advising him to investigate things firsthand. The young man flashed a quick smile and accepted the team-up offer. A long time ago, a massive ancient empire wiped out the Madden mages, and finally brought total peace and unity to the entire continent. Now everyone tries to recreate their tech, making their relics incredibly valuable. These ancient artifacts hold crazy powers. When our hero realized this, and realized that the world's best treasures are all ancient relics, a plan formed. He introduced himself as a humble priest serving a support goddess. Named Marich, and was met with very warm welcomes from the group. A mercenary stepped forward, offering a hand and introducing himself as Carmen Valtis. This name immediately made the young priest look up with a curious look. He shook the man's hand, asking about that familiar-sounding last name. And yes, Carmen confirmed he is indeed related to Anthony of the Black Wolves. But to make sure there was no confusion, his new boss clarified that he is just an illegitimate son, giving a playful wink. Our priest wondered about this secret son business, but kept his mouth shut. Simply smiling back at the man's surprising honesty, he couldn't help but reflect on how a supposedly righteous wolf leader had a secret child. It just goes to show that rumors and reality are often completely different things. Knowing it was pretty rude to pry into personal matters, our priest changed the subject and asked to meet the rest of the crew. Carmen introduced a cloaked mage named Tunisa, whose face was completely hidden. She would be the guide leading them straight to the hidden relics. Next, Valtis pointed to Sukis from the One-Horn tribe, a massive warrior who always had their backs. The big guy stepped forward with a smile, firmly shaking hands and saying he was honored to meet the famous demon killer. Feeling quite embarrassed by the heavy title, the priest waved his hands, gently asking the big guy to just call him by his name. But Sukis dismissed his modesty, pointing out that true heroes shouldn't feel embarrassed by their great deeds, his eyes filled with pure respect. With that sorted out, Carmen suggested they start moving. mentioning that the trek on foot would take them about 2 days. 2 days later, as the dark night settled over the deep forest, they finally decided to set up camp and build a nice, warm fire. Seeing the young priest sitting quietly on a nearby log, Carmen asked why he wasn't sleeping, warning him to rest while he still had the chance. Our hero replied that he was already fully rested and not tired at all, prompting Carmen to laugh about the limitless energy of the young. He then asked the priest to share some of his wild adventures, assuming a holy demon killer would have plenty of stories to tell. But the priest got quite shy, admitting that his actual battle experience was as blank as a fresh layer of winter snow, looking away nervously. Carmen asks him about his ideal type, curious about what traits catch his eye. Staring at his bandaged hand, he remembers his past, feeling a brief flash of jealousy. Lost in thought, the young man begins thinking out loud as he continues his explanation. He talks about needing her by his side, admitting he loves watching her sleep peacefully. Seeing her sleep beside him is peaceful. Meanwhile, their conversation keeps going. Carmen jumps in, arguing that a dream partner needs a massive heart. That way she can hold all that goodness. Meanwhile, the mother of Spoil watches. The goddess witnessed their entire chat, and though she still grumbles, she listens. She actually uses her fingers to give a little gesture of approval. It seems she really likes his answer. Marich pauses, raising his hands high. The archer starts gesturing in the air, explaining how a heart works. He outlines where the heart sits in the chest, demanding the perfect size. Carmen openly brags about his obsession with huge chests. Picturing it all in his head, Marich just laughs and replies in a friendly way. He agrees that knowing one's own preferences is helpful for future adventures. Marich respects that his companion is so incredibly honest about his desires. He calls it a good trait, but warns him not to say this to girls. Carmen replies that he would never discuss this with just anyone. He only shares this with Marich. Honestly, talking to him feels incredibly natural. It is like catching up with an old friend, bringing them much closer. A genuine bond forms between the two. Marich smiles back, completely relaxed. He enjoys nothing more than sitting and chatting with a good companion. Neither of them wants to sleep, so they keep the conversation going. They ignore their sleeping allies nearby, fully enjoying the quiet night. Once the sun rises, Marich and the crew are already moving out. He silently argues with the mother of Spoil about her strict warnings. She wanted him to choose his allies carefully, but he looks back. After talking all night, Marich realizes he truly enjoys this man's company. But then, silence. Tunisa arrives with a freezing, dead-serious look on her face. The warm, friendly atmosphere instantly vanishes, replaced by pure business. She pulls back her hood, reveals a mysterious key, and explains her plan. It is time to unlock the ruins and begin the next phase. Entering the ruins of the ancient empire requires one major step first. Believe me, they must find a special key to unlock those ancient treasures. Next, they have to reach the exact coordinates and read the ancient artifact. Reading those ancient runes is key, and once the correct spell is cast, a glowing keyhole appears in the air, ready for them to insert and turn. The key to unlock it, because only skilled mages can read the ancient language, their help is absolutely critical for a successful run. But there's a loophole, and it only applies to special players. This includes our main character, who possesses some unique abilities. Marich knows he can read the runes, but decides to keep it quiet. He stands silently, watching as the massive portal begins to open. Smiling warmly, Carmen Valtis motions for him to take the lead. He carefully reaches his hand into the shimmering gateway to check it. Finding the key on his own was impossible. He lacked local connections entirely. Quietly, the priest followed his partners, looking around in the dim light. Suddenly, their leader gasped in absolute awe. They stepped out, a colossal ancient ruin stretched out before them. The hired guide stared. He compared this sight to every old ruin. Absolutely perfect, he eagerly begged to start researching the vast ruins. Marn nodded along. He acted ready to dive into the secrets ahead. But deep down, a dark, sinister smile cracked across his face. His heart raced. He was finally entering a place from legend. Tunisa distrusted their new partner. Still, she chose to stay silent. She walked in the back, sighing heavily to control her rising temper. They pushed forward. A massive hall appeared, lit only by dim firelight. Total silence. Everyone fell deep into their own thoughts while walking. You won't believe what was waiting for them at the end. Ancient writing on the stone demanded proof of imperial blood. Reading the text, the robed mage spoke up sharply about this. Confused, the young men turned to look at her in bewilderment. She explained they lacked the blood of the ancient royal family. Her brow furrowed. Hard times were definitely ahead for this party. Get ready. Right then, the heavy doors slowly creaked open. A blinding light poured out, catching everyone completely off guard. Suddenly, hostiles, a swarm of bizarre, screaming creatures flew right out. Sukus of the One-Horned tribe immediately dropped into a fighting stance. Weapon drawn, he prepared to smash the incoming wave of enemies. He waited for the perfect second, then charged like a bullet. A massive swing of his blade shattered the beasts into dust. Tunisa refused to stay idle. She quickly pulled out her artifact. Eyes closed, she chanted a fast spell as her staff flared. The stone floor cracked apart. Beams of intense light erupted. The ground rumbled, freezing the crawling monsters in sheer shock. No time to react. The deadly trap was already sprung. The light beams exploded, blasting the creatures straight into the air. Debris rained down. Our protagonist just stood there, watching the chaos. He stood dead center, calmly thinking about his next move. Time to act. He finally gripped his sword and braced. Unsheathing the blade, he began slicing down every beast in his path. He cleared the first wave, but more were already diving down. But watch out, he's completely blind to what's coming behind him. A vicious monster locked onto his back, diving for a strike. He would have been hit if the mother of spoils didn't scream. Her warning cry echoed, forcing the young man to spin around. Fast reaction, he spun around just in time to block. Steel clashed against claws. They stood locked in a tense standoff. Eye to eye, the young hero calmly planned his next strike. But before he could strike, a stray arrow suddenly whistled through. Straight into the monster's skull, letting loose a massive spray of blood. The guy breathed a sigh of relief as the deadly beast collapsed right before his eyes. That clean kill was all thanks to their hired mercenary, who also happened to be an elite archer. He let loose his arrow with flawless precision. Despite the massive distance between them, Marn turned around to show his deep gratitude to his ally, but then the team leader immediately voiced a very sharp question. Why was the mage throwing monsters right into their lines, risking everyone's safety? Honestly, who could blame him? It baffled Marn too. Tunisa, their robed mage, snapped back defensively that it was actually the fastest way to wipe out the threat, completely ignoring how dangerous it was. She smugly muttered that since the monsters were dead, everyone should quit. Complaining, her attitude made the giant step in, pointing a massive finger. Voltus rushed to stop the bickering, calling them out and offering some food. Instead, the massive giant slumped onto the hard floor with a heavy thud, looking absolutely furious. He grumbled about how Marek the priest really earned his terrifying name. Voltus scolded them again, which only made their employer chuckle. Turning his attention away, Marn praised Carmen for his incredible archery skills. The archer shrugged, explaining he had trained relentlessly since he was a kid. He had poured every single spare hour into mastering the weapon, recalling those endless days of grueling practice that brought him closer to absolute mastery. Just then Tunisa asked if they were ready to push forward right now. Both young men stared back at her in complete disbelief, moving closer. She proudly insisted that her mana pool was still nearly full. She was totally ready to march, but a low, rumbling growl erupted from the giant. Sukusu demanded to know why she was constantly dragging them ahead, without a single care for anyone else. He yelled that the frontline fighters needed rest, unlike lazy spellcasters who just stood there chanting. Everyone stared in tense silence. Tunisa snapped back, saying if he was the only weakling who needed a break, they should just leave him behind. Talk about a completely toxic teammate. Tension filled the room. Sukusu gritted his teeth, utterly sick of her toxic attitude and constant nagging. Stepping in with authority, the leader called for a brief rest before they continued, firmly putting an end to the petty bickering once and for all. Annoyed, the mage stomped away to rest, while Marn chuckled softly. Looking at his boss, he couldn't help but think about how stubborn mages truly were, calling them total idiots in his head as he watched her leave. He mused on how incredibly easy their lives were. They never had to work for their power, since they were born with that natural gift. It was a frustrating reality that kept spinning in Marn's mind. Humans were mostly similar, yet those blessed with mana got an automatic awakening the moment they hit the right age, a thought he couldn't shake. Out of nowhere, the secrets of ancient magic just magically appear in their heads. With zero effort, almost like an inherited memory, without paying any price, they wield absolute power and read complex spells like it was their birthright. It felt deeply unfair. Marn quietly watched her, reflecting on how easily mana corrupts, violating the laws of this world, creating a massive, unnatural imbalance. He got it, magical rebirth, like the one Tunisa went through, changes everything. It grants them a completely new essence, along with powers they never knew before. But overloading a brain with too much knowledge at once, cruel. It forces a mental shutdown, an absolute aversion to learning, and as a result, most mages turn into stubborn, close-minded fools. They refuse to grow. The young man realized this, observing how incredibly selfish they were. Then, his gaze locked onto the wicked Sukusa. Yet Tunisa was different, despite looking like just another mage. There was a quiet, nurturing dignity to her that set her apart. Breaking the heavy silence, Carmen Valtis announced it was time to move. He stood up, ready to guide them back into the dark ruins. But as they prepared to advance, a sudden obstacle blocked them. And honestly, they were in for some serious trouble. A grinding, violent screech echoed from the corridor ahead of them. Then a massive stone door slammed down, sealing the path forward. Panic flared. Someone screamed that the exit behind them was blocked too. The leader spun around as a heavy, unnatural vibration filled the air. A dark crimson glow pulsed, and a colossal stone portal tore open. Out stepped a massive titan, towering over the trapped adventurers. Its heavy footsteps shook the floor, radiating pure, devastating power. Marx grinned. His theory was dead on. The previous enemies they fought were indeed incredibly weak. Realizing the real battle was starting, he stood with his allies. They faced the metal nightmare together. The gravity of it hit the one-horned warrior immediately, who shifted instantly into a solid fighting stance. He stood there with an annoyed look on his face, waiting until suddenly Tunisa rushed up, yanked him back, and told him to stay out of this fight. He was dumbfounded. Even the colossal white metal monster seemed utterly confused, pausing to watch the strange group rally behind a single female mage. She held her shining magical artifact high in front of her, ready to act. Chanting in an ancient tongue, she unleashed a wave of raw magic. A brilliant blue light flooded the chamber, slowly creeping toward the beast. She targeted the ceiling, forcing the massive stones overhead to obey her. Slowly, the heavy boulders began to fall over the metallic giant. Suddenly, their leader screamed. He told her to finish or run. He saw what was coming and knew the danger of a cave-in. But the stubborn mage refused to retreat, keeping her magic locked on. The creature's head, it was a direct, unrelenting stream of energy. Everyone screamed at once, but Tunisa just stood there, completely oblivious. She had no idea what was crashing down right above her. Hearing their desperate screams, she finally looked up and froze in absolute terror. A massive shower of heavy stones was plummeting straight toward her. Her spell barely scratched the titan, but it definitely made it furious. Raising its massive arm, it prepared to crush her. Sukusa tensed up. Blood sprayed directly toward him. Keeping his eyes wide open, he stared right through the crimson curtain. The massive metal monster hovering over the giant now towered over him. Vicious and bloodthirsty, the beast was ready to unleash its full fury onto him. Marn screamed Sakusa's name at the top of his lungs, desperate to get his attention and find a way to help him in this deadly moment. His warning was incredibly fast, but the giant had no time to move. In a split second, he saw a blur flying straight toward him, locking onto him with terrifying speed. Massive explosion tore through the battlefield, sending dust and thick smoke into the air. Nothing was visible through the haze, save for desperate voices crying out the giant's name. Their mighty one-horned ally had taken a devastating, brutal blow. The impact had smashed directly into his face, leaving it bloody and unrecognizable. The white robotic beast, completely untouched by the clash, loomed right before the two remaining squad members, the young priest Marn and his employer. Marn excitedly asked Carmen if he wanted to survive, but the man was too dazed to comprehend the question, so Marn put it in much simpler terms. Carmen quickly nodded yes, only to be told to grit his teeth. Still, he didn't understand what was happening, which quickly wiped the playful grin off Marn's face. Standing there in absolute bewilderment, the clueless employer did not even realize that the young priest's fist was already racing toward his chin, muttering About how handy it is to have a giant around, Marn charges forward. While carrying his knocked-out employer, whom he had just deliberately knocked cold, Marach instantly demanded that the giant be summoned, and right on cue. A towering beast conjured by Marn's power materialized above the metal monster. The new summon was colossal and incredibly powerful, raising two of its massive limbs to smash them directly down onto the machine's head. As the titan-sized brawl erupted, Marn was determined not to waste a single second of this chaotic clash. He quickly grabbed his unconscious companion and bolted away from the fierce clash. As he ran, he jokingly asked the mother of spoils if she agreed that giants make the best shields, looking back to watch the chaos. Noticing that their mages were gone, Marn spotted her left-behind artifact on the ground, refusing to let good loot go to waste. The priest swiftly absorbed 1,000 divinity, then Sakyus's dropped weapon caught his attention, allowing him to absorb another 100 divinity, boosting his stats for the brutal fight ahead. Once he reached a safe spot, Marn gently set his unconscious ally down against the wall. He stood up and carefully observed the distant battlefield, assuming it would take his summon quite some time to defeat the white robotic beast. But his thoughts were suddenly interrupted when the mother of spoils demanded brutal kill, forcing Marn to transform as dark tattoos surfaced across his skin. Meanwhile, the giant summon fought on, completely stunned as its strikes failed to leave even a single scratch on the mechanical opponent. Frustrated, the summon bared its teeth, preparing for another desperate assault. Locking his gaze onto the white metal giant, Marn charged forward, with a clear strategic plan forming in his mind. Knowing his main target was the core nestled inside the machine's head, he braced himself. Specifically that blue crystal. Marek stared at it, realizing it was different from the rest. It stood out completely. Seizing the moment, he used his creature's massive height to scale up. He leaped onto the iron giant. Success, he muttered under his breath with absolute certainty. Shattering that shining crystal would definitely turn the tide. He had to reach it. He clambered higher, closer. He finally reached the top of the monster's metal head. Marek prepared for a heavy jump, intending to leap onto his steel opponent. Shouting that he had the target in his sights, he launched himself forward. Sailing through the air, he caught his own reflection in the blue glass before impact. With a heavy strike, the crystal shattered. Broken, shards flew everywhere. Sharp debris rained down on him, but he simply smiled, thrilled to have hit his mark. Not even bothering to dodge, he landed safely back beside his summoned beast. Together, they watched the giant metal titan freeze, its glowing crown now gone. His summon let out a deafening roar of victory into the dim chamber. The massive iron enemy collapsed heavily to the floor, dead, no movement at all. But this construct was far from simple, hiding yet another entity deep inside its metallic core. It shrieked, tilting its head back, as Marek warmly thanked them both for the assist. As he smiled, the chilling voice of the Mother of Decay suddenly echoed. Her whisper demanded more slaughter, instantly wiping the grin clean off his face. Following her pointing hand, Marek gasped as dozens of portals tore open above. And out of those tears came more white iron giants, each bearing the same glowing crystal. All his confidence evaporated in an instant. Gone, he stood there completely frozen. He stood in a daze, wondering how on earth he could face an entire army alone. Meanwhile, the towering metal giants began slamming onto the ground, one after the other. Their impact shook the room, sending the nearby survivors into a state of sheer panic. With terror in his eyes, the priest squeaked out a question about their numbers. Desperately clinging to hope, he tried to make sense of this overwhelming threat. Once the leader gathered his composure, he quickly asked about the others. He wanted to know the fate of Sukas and Tunisa, only to receive grim news. Both had met a tragic end, with absolutely no chance of rescue. The enemy's rapid evolution left them helpless, forcing Marek to lower his head. He felt a pang of sympathy, while his employer spoke with heavy guilt. The employer admitted he should have turned the key before the giant fell. His own greed had cost innocent lives, a burden heavy on his soul. But the mercenaries knew the risks and signed up anyway, prepared for this. So Marek gently advised him not to carry the crushing weight of blame. Looking around in confusion, Kramer Valtis asked where they had ended up. The reply came quickly. They were in the chamber behind the black door. Something clicked in Kramer's mind. Impossible. This made absolutely no sense. He opened his mouth to protest, but a quick gesture silenced him. Realizing he was knocked out to hide a secret, he simply thanked Marek. Gratitude filled his heart as he recalled his brush with death. With a deep bow and hand on his chest, the man swore a solemn oath. He pledged the Valtis name to repay the life debt owed to him. Marek had no plans to decline. He smiled, eagerly accepting the grand gesture. He openly welcomed the reward, while his mind drifted back to the giant. With the ruins still crumbling around them after their escape, Marnak suggested they keep moving, and his companion agreed. Quietly admitting to a few lies, Marnak recalled how after defeating the first metal monster, 3 more similar beasts crashed down from the ceiling. That was why he left the spoiled giant as bait for those 3 metal opponents, relying on his stamina to survive. When the door swung open, Marnak kicked Carmen inside with unexpected agility and effortless precision, casually telling the giant to handle the rest of the fight. He knew the noble would survive, hoping he wouldn't be too angry. As they walked, Marnak casually kicked a small pebble along the ground, looking up to smile at their progress when he noticed a massive gate with a glowing sign at the top. Realizing they had finally reached the end of these ruins, he was close to his goal, so he urged them to enter. Marnak glanced over at Carmen, who was still staring up at the mysterious glowing sign. The heavy doors slowly creaked open, revealing what was inside the room to their eager eyes. Grinning from ear to ear, the noble stood at the threshold and shouted that the legends in his book had not lied, meeting the priest's questioning look. Carmen admitted he knew this request was completely out of line, but he begged the priest to hand over the glowing necklace. He spoke with intense urgency, as if the artifact was extremely precious to him, promising a handsome reward. Laughing softly, the priest asked what kind of powers this necklace actually possessed to draw his attention. Stepping closer to the relic, Carmen began to explain that the piece was called an ancestral pointer, activated by single drop of blood to search for a specific bloodline. After explaining how the relic guides the user to the person they seek, he gazed intently at the necklace. Marnak quietly worked out the truth behind the artifact's true purpose, but chose to keep his thoughts entirely to himself. With a polite bow, Carmen smiled and explained his plan to track down his long-lost mother, hoping to convince the priest to help. Stepping up to the stone table, Marnak pointed to the second relic, asking if he could take the sword in exchange for the pointer. Later, resting by a cozy campfire in the woods, the noble admitted he preferred to avoid giant metal monsters. Marnak could only nod in agreement, thinking back to when they had stood near the portal as that mechanical monster suddenly burst into the room. They both knew that even a single second of hesitation meant certain death. Carmen admitted that he actually had time to accept his own demise before stopping himself, lazily locking his hands behind his head. After a moment of silence, he called out to Marnak, who turned to look at him, taking off the pointer and holding it out. The noble asked the young priest for a divine blessing. Chuckling softly, Marnak agreed and prepared to grant his companion's request. Channeling his power, he spoke the words of the dark goddess. To grant the blessing, confident and resolute, Carmen pricked his finger. He pricked his finger, waiting for a drop of blood. He stared at it for a long moment. Gathering his thoughts, he let the blood drip onto the necklace, hoping it would point the way. It needed to lead them to the right person. Suddenly, a faint red vapor rose from the relic. The strange mist drifted upward, drawing the young priest's gaze. He watched, completely spellbound by the sight. Valtis looked absolutely thrilled, silently mouthing a prayer of hope as he stared at the glowing relic. He thought of his missing mother, seeing a sign of life in the working relic. Marek smiled warmly, genuinely glad the magic was working and could actually help his new companion. The mercenary admitted he couldn't have pulled this off alone and felt incredibly grateful. He honestly didn't know how to repay the favor, offering a deep bow. Marek just laughed, saying he would gladly accept whatever reward came his way. Valtis asked him to keep working together until his mother was finally safe and sound. The priest looked a bit taken aback by the sudden offer, blinking in surprise. Valtis stood up, waving his hands excitedly as he painted a picture of their future. He promised they would visit the capital, where he could pay a proper fortune for Marek's help. He thumped his own chest, boasting with a massive grin. He swore to cover every single travel expense, pouring his heart into the promise. Marek secretly chuckled, realizing the guy was being totally transparent with his emotions. Still, he was ready to agree. Beside them, the cozy campfire crackled in the dark. Voltus remained frozen in that awkward, heroic pose, plastering on a bright, hopeful smile. Feeling a bit silly after a moment, he pleaded for the priest to finally answer. Deciding that accepting wouldn't make him look greedy, Marach offered a warm handshake. He officially agreed to join the quest and help track down the mercenary's missing mother. He smiled, saying it was a true privilege to back up a friend on the road. The priest was fully ready for whatever lay ahead. Back at the tavern, Erin sat across from him with a deep frown. She asked him if he was seriously leaving after everything she had done for him. Shocked by his casual attitude, she scolded him for planning to just abandon her. Before he could answer, she told him to hold out his hand. The priest blinked, utterly confused by what she was trying to do. Erin explained that while things normally took time, she had rushed the process. She had stayed up late just to make sure everything was ready for him. Gently, the clerk pressed a heavy object into his open palm, closing his fingers. He stared down, stunned as a metallic gleam caught the dim tavern light. He couldn't even find his voice. It was a silver mercenary token. He never expected her to get him one, yet there it was, resting in his hand. The shiny token practically glowed, leaving him completely speechless. Reminding him of how hard she worked to secure it, Erin stood up from the table. She leaned forward, crossing her arms, and demanded a proper thank you and a promise. She insisted he say the exact words, hoping she was making her point crystal clear. She watched his reaction closely, wondering if her message had actually landed. Marach sighed internally, realizing his life as a wanderer made promises impossible. He couldn't tie himself down, knowing he would only let her down eventually. Erin looked at him pensively, teasingly warning that he would end up lonely forever. She joked that a wanderer like him would die alone unless he changed his ways. With a heavy sigh, she decided to speak the final farewell words herself. Our hero gives her a questioning look, wondering what on earth she might say next. She says she will see him again soon, leaving the young man even more surprised. Still, she keeps talking about their next meeting whenever the right chance finally comes. She promises it will happen way sooner than he thinks. Honestly, I doubt it. The priest wants to ask a logical question, but she simply refuses to answer. Instead, the clerk puts a finger to her lips and offers one last cryptic warning. This bizarre punishment leaves the confused priest marred completely in the dark. Laughing that everyone is born bald anyway, Tredden starts talking about reaching human perfection. He aims to achieve the ultimate natural form, but hearing about the upcoming departure. Hearing about the trip to the capital, he stops laughing and whispers that they must prepare. Sitting right across the table from the young man, he holds a tiny envelope. Our main character asks a confused question, prompting his host to explain everything. The man continues detailing what this letter of recommendation actually does. Looking pretty ashamed, the man shakes his empty pouch to show he wanted to pay. But rebuilding the entire city took every single coin, leaving him with absolutely nothing. So he gives him the letter instead, hoping his old comrades can help out. Their backup should be more than enough to make up for the lack of actual cash. Still, he warns that reaching these old friends will not be easy. He advises not to show the letter unless there is absolutely no other choice. This makes Marach laugh. Finally, Giza's bald master shares his deepest hope. He wishes him an incredible journey, since life is usually way too short for greatness. Soon our hero and his employer set off together. They trudge along a freezing, snow-covered road for days, pushed by the bitter wind. Their destination is the town of Kelton, which is still several days away. Carmen Voltus points this out, a faint smile playing on her lips. Our protagonist quickly guesses she still dislikes his partner, and he is right. That annoying mother divinity is already back, ready to ruin the mood yet again. She only tagged along for 3.5 fingers of pure divinity. Absorbing that will grant 10,000 divinity to unlock a brand new power. He quietly hopes to see his jolly friend alive as he catches up. Walking closer, he listens to his partner, humming a peaceful tune until danger strikes. He suddenly draws his sword, completely startling his boss who was strolling ahead. She freezes with pure terror painted on her face, before trying to force a fake smile. She asks what is wrong, and our young hero answers with just one word. Blood, he instantly drops into a solid combat stance, preparing for a fight. Brace yourselves, he warns her that the blood is closing in fast. It is closing in fast. Shouting a warning, he almost drops his sword. Right then, something explodes out of the ground and tosses Voltus high into the air. A monstrous spider crawls from the earth, leaping incredibly high into the trees. It perches on a branch, glaring hungrily down at the two travelers below. Recognizing the snow spider, Carmen relies on her years of travel experience. These beasts are insanely strong, boasting terrifying power and blinding speed. The monster immediately opens its massive jaws and starts spitting deadly venom. Our nearby archer acts fast, drawing back his bowstring in a flash. He barely manages to notch an arrow as their precious time rapidly runs out. With absolutely no time left to lose, the protagonist jumped in to save his friend. Block the spider and shield his comrade, slicing forward. The creature clearly did not expect this outcome, shrinking back into its own massive body. It realized someone had actually managed to block its attack. The swift counterattack cleanly severed one of its limbs. It fell nearby, forcing the beast down to the ground to keep up the struggle. While our protagonist muttered about needing to wash his hands before using his sword. He held the bloody divine blade high, continuing his relentless assault by swinging it everywhere. The legendary weapon cut through the air, striking targets with absolute precision. Blood sprayed everywhere, covering the entire area in a deep crimson mist. His green eyes flashed with pure, manic joy. He relished the dark slaughter. Meanwhile, back in a quiet room, Trine apologized to his guest for having to host her in such a cramped place because the guest room was completely ruined. Her calm reply showed she did not care at all about the mess. In fact, the quiet priestess had an entirely different reason for her visit. She came with a clear motive. When Trine asked why she had suddenly traveled here, he noted with a small smile how rare such a pilgrimage was. The Blue Flame sect rarely visited. Suddenly, she slid a paper across the wooden table, revealing highly classified and deeply shocking details with her hand. She calmly gestured for him to look at the secret document. Taking the paper, his warm smile instantly vanished and his face went dead silent. He realized the heavy weight of what he was holding. She asked if he had ever seen the young man shown in the sketch, revealing our hero's portrait. Giza recognized him instantly, placing a thoughtful hand on his chin. The master slowly inquired why the mysterious Blue Flame sect was searching for this particular person. Hearing her reply about personal reasons, Giza had absolutely no intention of giving away the protagonist. Knowing this, the master politely apologized and said his goodbyes, causing her face to darken with anger. After explaining that he had very little free time in the cities, he said goodbye to the blue-haired girl, who happily smiled back. She walked out, no looking back. She stepped directly into the cold. Men with hidden motives, she had absolutely zero interest in any of them. The gentleman scratched his chin thoughtfully as he watched her silhouette vanish. He chose silence. Meanwhile, Marnak and his companion waited. Still in that spot, his ally watched him with absolute confusion. Why was his employer standing curiously over the dead snow spider? When he asked what was happening, the man explained his plan. He wanted the venom sac. It contained a highly potent anesthetic, perfect for coating arrowheads or selling for a handsome price. As they spoke, Carmen suddenly drew a remarkably fine blade. Marnak wondered, how did a pampered young master know such things? The seasoned hunter simply chuckled softly at his companion's amusement. Turning to the youth, he spoke about his past adventures. He had survived countless monster hunts. Experience was everything. Nothing beats hands-on training, he muttered as Valtus sliced away. He sliced the tissue, holding the sack to the creature, noting how delicate it was. The blood splatter was stronger than expected. He stepped in, offering to handle the mess. Our hero took over the extraction, realizing his partner was completely clueless. He suggested they pack up their gear and head straight into town. Their employer agreed, mentioning they desperately needed to find a place to wash up. This pleased the boy, but suddenly, two terrified men bolted into the street in panic. One screamed, pointing a shaking finger toward whatever was driving them mad with fear. Meanwhile, our hero and his ally trudged through the heavy, sinking sand. It slowly dragged them down, but they kept pushing past the obstacles. Suddenly, one of those panicked men rushed toward the two travelers. Something disturbing was happening, and the man looked utterly consumed by dread. The trembling stranger asked how they managed to reach this place. He stared fearfully at the newcomers, who found the question incredibly odd. Feeling a bit awkward, they simply replied that they walked the entire way. The stranger explained that Kelton had been locked down for 3 days because of a monster. This news left our hero and his partner exchanging stunned glances. Marak composed himself, his expression instantly sharpened. He demanded details, what was really going on here. The stranger confirmed monster attacks were getting worse every single day. At the attack sites, they found absolutely nothing, no corpses, no items. Hearing this, Carmen Baltus chimed in with a question about snow spider victims. The current situation made no sense, given how these creatures normally behave. Spiders typically just drain the blood of their victims on the spot. It would be nearly impossible for them not to leave a single trace behind. This only deepened the mystery until a sudden shout from outside interrupted them. Both travelers turned, looking toward where the panicked man had run from. His partner came sprinting back, screaming loudly. He yelled that Lord Kelton wanted an immediate meeting with the new adventurers. He panted heavily, struggling to breathe. Without waiting, he offered to escort them directly to the manor. The boys shared a quick look, completely unfazed and without any fear. They casually decided to go, knowing they needed to hear what he had to say. With tears in his eyes, Lord Kelton expressed absolute joy at the arrival of the renowned priest of Marak, the demon slayer, to their besieged city. Confirming he knew about the monster, our hero tried to cut to the chase. He wanted answers fast, prompting Lord Kelton to explain the situation. The Lord gravely explained that their troubles were caused by a wicked spirit. He claimed an evil entity was behind the attacks, but they looked skeptical. To the travelers, this sounded like absolute nonsense. Exhaling deeply, our hero noted that blocking an entire city is impossible for one dark cultist. But Lord Kelton revealed that multiple factions were actually working together. At least 4 dark sects had united to isolate the city from the world. Hearing this, the face of Marak instantly became deadly serious. The Lord wept, utterly clueless as to why these disasters had targeted his city. Ever since his reign started, everything had gone to ruin, he sobbed, wiping his face. Calming down slightly, the Lord explains they still have plenty of food and supplies. He claims the city guards are highly motivated to resist the upcoming siege. But this surprise attack has cut them off from nearby cities instantly. Happening faster than a blink, it proves just how dire things really are. They desperately need someone to break past enemy lines and deliver the message. Having explained the stakes, the Lord finally delivers his official request. He needs a fearless group, soldiers who do not care about dying. The Lord stares straight into our hero's eyes without a trace of a smile. Sighed heavily as if he has no choice, our protagonist agrees. He promises to put his entire strength behind this dangerous mission. Later, he tries to explain his decision to his furious, nagging mother. She keeps screaming for blood, making him wonder if he should just walk away. But instead of arguing, he decides to diffuse the tension in a different way. Smiling, he holds up a strange item retrieved from his finder, shaped like a tray. He notes this rare artifact is typically buried deep in the western deserts. Setting the device down, a sudden stream of water bubbles up like a tiny fountain. Remembering his mother's advice about blades cutting better when they are wet, the young man gently lowers his sword directly into the flowing water. He murmurs that living without regrets is the only real way to go. Raising his hands, he telekinetically lifts the tray without even touching it. The water vanishes instantly as the artifact floats into his grasp. Stashing the new treasure away, he quickly checks the rest of the room. He searches the dark corners, but finds absolutely nothing else of value. Deep down, he knows this Lord's request is the start of a massive quest. Turns out 4 different dark sects are working together, talk about a nightmare. While the term evil spirit sounds terrifying, the reality is far more practical. It is actually a common title that does not scare him much. The high gods simply slap this label on anyone they dislike. Once marked, every single righteous faction in the world hunts you down. Yet these branded outcasts do share one major, unifying trait. Almost none of them have a single shred of sanity left. Unlike the high temples, these chaotic cults rarely cooperate with one another. That is exactly why this sudden, massive alliance feels so incredibly dangerous. 4 distinct dark groups are surrounding the city walls at once. He quietly notes this, reassessing the entire battlefield in his mind. This is no accident. He ponders this while riding through a heavy snowstorm. Battling the freezing wind, his companion suddenly senses a strange presence. He glances backward in pure terror while keeping his horse moving. Skittering closely behind them are massive, leaping frost spiders hungry for a meal. The beasts lock onto the riders, treating them as easy winter prey. Smiling darkly, our hero whispers that the hunt has finally begun. He yells to his partner, Carmen Balta, to prepare for a distraction. Carmen warns him that even a master warrior cannot survive this trap. But he knows running away will only get them cornered in the deep snow. Fighting is their only shot at making it out alive. While his pursuers closed in, Marnak had a completely different take on the situation. "Go get backup," those were his final words before jumping straight off his horse. To save them, shocked and helpless, his companion only now understood his crazy plan. But there was absolutely no way to stop him now. Meanwhile, Marnak, hurtling straight into the snow, laughed and asked the goddess of decay if his wild entrance looked cool, clearly hoping to receive a bit of her rare praise. His extremely violent landing blasted a massive cloud of fresh snow and small pebbles upwards, which actually peppered his retreating companions as they rode away. This sudden commotion not only attracted the fleeing spiders, but also some hungry beasts with bulging eyes and razor-sharp fangs. Every starving creature in the woods was now rushing directly toward the exact spot where Marnak had crashed down. A massive, diverse swarm was closing in on him, not even expecting the mother of decay to find his dramatics amusing. The boy simply grinned wickedly, taking her silence as a compliment before facing the horde. These aggressive beasts did not pause for a second. Instead, they were absolutely thrilled to see their target emerge from the snow in full glory. With zero hesitation, the young priest charged straight ahead into the monstrous wave, swinging his weapon with deadly force to slash through everything in his path. The monsters grew completely enraged, launching incredibly vicious and desperate counterattacks. But their resistance only pissed him off, making him fight even harder and enjoy the bloodbath. He jokingly remarked that he would need to buy a tub and take a hot bath every single day if this became his normal routine. While flashing a dark smirk, deciding to analyze the situation properly later, he muttered to the mother of decay that the monsters definitely knew he was here, but simply refused to welcome him, disappointed by their terrible hospitality. His playful grin vanished, his face turned ice-cold and determined as he pressed on. After the skirmish, he noticed the abandoned cargo wagons were empty, confirming the clever monsters had stolen all the goods before retreating into their nest. Marnak entered a small, dark cave to investigate, walking through the narrow passage. He suddenly spotted a severed hand by his boot, then an entire body. He instantly recognized this as the grim work of snow spiders, knowing they enjoyed wrapping up a tasty meal he still could not agree with their twisted desire to use these human remains as macabre wall decorations. Whispering a quick promise to stay alert, the young priest answered the goddess of decay, who was frantically trying to warn him about the danger. Marnak wondered aloud how many innocent people these beasts had already devoured, and if they were breeding, continuing forward until something made him freeze. Stopping near a massive, cavernous opening, he noticed the tunnels were absolutely huge, as if built for actual giants. Grinning darkly up at the floating divine presence, he shouted out a challenge, asking why the cowards were refusing to show themselves. He knew they were hiding. As he walked, he quietly acknowledged the stalker's presence as he had known it all along. The giant spider was clinging to the ceiling, lurking directly above his head. Enraged at being discovered, the massive arachnid hissed, baring its huge jaws and opening its glowing red eyes as it prepared to strike. Descend quickly on the intruder, reacting fast with a serious tone. The protagonist asks his mother to draw a protective magic line for his defense. Obeying his words, a green glow ignites and releases magical energy. It draws a bright boundary line across the ground like a protective moat. Explaining his need for her power, the protagonist stands his ground. He stands completely still as the giant beast hovers right above him. Promising a blood sacrifice tonight, he chants as his summoned beast emerges. Beast summoned under his command starts to slip out of the portal. The creature falls completely out of the portal, landing right above the spider, crashing down hard with dangling limbs, letting out a wild shriek. As the ogre spider has no time to react, the heavy limb slams down. Summoned monster strikes with incredible force while the protagonist watches. He remains in place, but glowing green tattoos flare across his body. This surge of magic awakens his power, but the enemy is tough. Is not that weak, and a single blow does nothing. He raises his sharp limbs and begins to simultaneously stab them deep into his attacker's massive body. The Spider not only attacks but also laughs as if gloating that everything is going in his favor, prompting Marich to rush to his aid at the sight of his enemy's clear superiority. Looking at the furious monster with many sharp teeth of his attacker, the young man realizes he must find a way to help his ally. He immediately starts swinging his sword, splattering blood and slicing through limbs, feeling the concentrated energy inside the beast. Queen's body trying not to damage her, Marich is deep in thought as he realizes she must have a vulnerable spot. His pondering almost hurts him when he barely spots the angry creature flying overhead, getting incredibly close to him. Reacting instantly, the protagonist thrusts his sharp blade above him, slicing the attacking monster clean in half, sending the pieces flying in different directions. Knowing he must sever all its legs to claim victory, he feels a surge of strength and sprints along a specific path, but not directly toward the fighting giants. Charging past his own monster, he yells out in order to charge straight at the giant ogre spider, completely shocking the fighting beast, which freezes for a second, promising to help his summon and hold down the enemy. The protagonist rushes closer and closer to put his tactical plan into action. Knowing his master will keep him safe, the creature immediately begins to scream, opening its maw to quickly grab the enemy's limbs, holding them down tightly, mentally muttering that a spider is still just a spider, even a giant one. The priest runs forward, gripping his fabric with one hand as if flying through the air, speaking his intention to slice the thinnest part of his enemy's body. He runs even closer, swinging his sword for a precise and very strong attack, striking one blow, then immediately a second, and several more precise hits on the same spot. He is not going to give up even after that, continuing to chop with his weapon at the exact same spot to finish the job. Marich watches the blood spraying in all directions, which actually amuses him. The spider, who feels something is being done to him but cannot move, just stands helplessly with its eyes bulged with pain, struggling to see what would happen next. The young man pushed forward with his brutal plan, even as the giant spider squirmed to break free. No escape. The arachnid's wild struggling was completely useless. His massive summoned beast held on tight, pinning the thrashing monster down so the young priest could make his move. He delivered one final, devastating strike. He sliced right through the monster's weakest joint. With his target shredded, Marich landed gracefully just as his summoned giant grabbed the spider. Seeing the battle end, the summon raised the giant arachnid high into the air. One sharp yank, the giant ripped the spider's massive legs right out of its sockets. Helpless, the beast could only shriek in agony as blood rained down everywhere. Standing in the crimson rain, Marich smiled, quietly celebrating his hard-won victory. No resting. A low, menacing growl suddenly rumbled right beside him as he tried to stand. Startled, he looked up. His terrifying summoned monster was looming directly over him. Flashing a soft, apologetic smile, Marich tried to apologize for leaving his summon behind. Offering a peace offering, he tried to make quick amends with his loyal giant. Response: none. The giant simply threw his massive head back, opening his jaw wide. He roared violently, flailing his massive arms in pure, chaotic triumph. Suddenly, an angry voice echoed from nearby, making Marich look away from his giant. He turned his head toward the noise, watching the colossal spider body closely. A girl crawled out of the dead beast, swearing like a sailor in absolute fury. Muttering to himself that he knew someone was hiding in there, Priest Marich watched her. He sized her up, carefully gauging how much of a threat she actually posed. Flame-like rage flared around her. Her eyes glowed scarlet as she spat out curses. She was utterly furious. This random priest had ruined her long-term, carefully nurtured plans. She screamed across the field, demanding to know if he served the evil spirits too. Ruined, all the months spent controlling the Spider Queen were now totally wasted. But Marich ignored her whining, asking with a cold stare what Kelton's group wanted. She spat back a flat refusal, clearly having no intention of playing nice. She kept shouting. Suddenly, a cold sword drove straight into her shoulder. She shrieked in agony, dropping to her knees under the sudden, brutal pain. Swift and deadly, the young priest had closed the distance, striking without mercy. Standing right over her, he calmly asked again why they were surrounding the city. His cold gaze made it obvious that he wasn't playing games. Any resistance meant death. Crimson blood pooled. The girl clutched her shoulder, screaming silently in absolute agony. She stared down at the dark, messy wound, completely ignoring his demands. Talk never, even with a blade at her throat, she spat out a defiant refusal. Death didn't scare her. She temporarily ignored the stinging pain, trying to stand. She slowly forced herself back up, showing a stubborn, terrifying will to fight. Marek simply smiled and agreed. This bizarre reaction caught her completely off guard. Too late, before she could even react, his blade sliced through the air. Clean cut, her severed head rolled away while her body collapsed in the dirt. No signs of life remained. Suddenly, the mother of spoil appeared, ready to feed. Waste not, want not, the creature quickly began harvesting divinity from the fresh corpse. Power up, this quick feast pulled in a massive 1,000 units of energy. How many more? Marek wondered how many cultists he'd have to execute to find the truth. Shrugging, he sheathed his sword, turning back to chat with his monstrous giant friend. Gloating over his bandaged hand, he smirked, sure the third prisoner would stay quiet. But the fourth they would break. Behind him, the mother of spoil devoured the dead ogre spider. Strolling out of the dark cave in a fantastic mood, he suddenly froze. His face fell instantly as he stared down at the unfolding scene of destruction. Talk about a massive setback, he realized he had been completely outplayed. Looking down from the high cliffs, he watched the very city he just left go up in flames. Nearby, a few voices argued about the pig's bizarre and unexpected powers. They were far greater than anyone anticipated, while Lord Kelton lay sobbing on the dirt. The barely alive Lord sobbed, while a villain complained about their wasted efforts. Standing in the middle of the burning street, the villain sighed over missed opportunities. Asking about the incarnation, she only received a deeply troubling answer. Her companion warned her that extracting divinity from living souls was highly unstable. Then the third partner chimed in, blaming everyone else for their failed plan. This failure forced them to rush, drastically cutting down their chances of success. These harsh accusations stung, and the dark-haired girl knew they were targeting her. Furious, she snapped back. Did they really think she messed up on purpose? Throwing up her middle finger to show her dedication, she let loose. She ranted about the constant interference from those two muscular monks, and that annoying jerk from the Enlightenment sect, pouring out her pure rage. Standing near the burning ruins, the first villain kept rambling on and on. Right next to them lay the cold, lifeless corpse of the town master. She kept complaining that Illa had completely failed to send the support spiders. If she had, they would have caught that annoying archer hours ago. Instead, Carmen Valtis rode away like a show-off, completely outrunning them all. The blonde-haired girl muttered that Illa was still missing, sparking another loud complaint. She shrieked about how Illa was always so obsessed with her disgusting pets. Sure, Illa could play with the corpses later, but they had no idea. They did not realize that both Illa and her spiders were already dead. Their male companion stepped in, desperately trying to end the useless bickering. He warned them that pointing fingers right now was completely pointless. That rat got away, and soon the Imperial troops would descend upon them. He was talking about the mercenary who had managed to escape with the priest. Thinking of the 3 years wasted on this scheme, he tried to reason. He begged his furious companions to focus on the threat at hand. But Parna cut him off with another loud, angry scream. She complained about working 3 years on this, only to get constant criticism. Shrieking in rage, she swore she did not let that rider escape intentionally. Parna was completely out of control now, her anger boiling over entirely. She kept shouting, accusing her partner of secretly letting him slide. Her words hit deep, leaving the blonde girl drowning in silent guilt. Sick of the endless shouting, the blonde girl closed her eyes and turned away. She headed toward the exit to check the chaotic situation outside. Their partner turned, promising that Illa would pay for letting their targets escape. He did his best to calm down his furious comrade. Lowering her voice, she finally muttered that she would keep her mouth shut. The dark-haired girl freezes, her partner's head suddenly rolls past her. He went outside to check, and now his headless body collapses in the dirt. Standing right there is the terrifying monster who did it. Sword raised high, Marek lets the blade's dark shadow fall over his target. The second partner freezes. He instantly realizes he is next. No hesitation, Marek instantly brings the heavy sword down. The blade crushes the trembling cultist. Another threat is permanently dealt with. Parna can only scream. Her final ally dies right in front of her. Left entirely alone, she looks up. The bloody stranger looms over her like a nightmare. He is completely terrifying. She stammers out a desperate, shaking curse. The goddess suddenly speaks. She scolds Marek for killing their only lead. Why end his life so quickly without asking a single question first? Marek shrugs it off. He admits things are looking a bit unfair now. He turns his cold gaze back to the last survivor. As they discuss the enemy's strange divine magic, the priest smiles darkly. His face shifts, the glowing, sinister tattoos slowly fade from his skin. He keeps arguing with the goddess. Survival matters way more than pride. Watching him debate with thin air leaves Parna, completely paralyzed with confusion. Marek stands perfectly still. He stares down at her trembling figure. The last of his glowing marks vanish entirely as he waits. He tilts his head. This quiet, calculating look terrifies her even more. She can barely breathe. A thick, suffocating dread fills the entire room. Dealing with this bizarre monster is too much. Finally, Marek speaks. Are you a devout follower of the evil god? Parna blinks in shock. Then Marek flashes an oddly warm, friendly smile. What exactly is Kelton's group trying to achieve in this town? The sudden shift to casual conversation is absolutely mind-blowing. She instantly spills everything. They spent 3 long years preparing this scheme. After all, nobody would spend 3 years on a completely useless endeavor, right? She stands shaking next to the towering, bizarre structure in the center. It feels like she was waiting for any excuse to reveal the truth. Marek silently watches her, absorbing every detail of her wild confession. Their goal: sacrifice every single person in town to fuel their god's birth. They are creating a divine manifestation inside that giant, pulsing orb right next to them. They hid here for 3 years, but started 5 days ahead of schedule. This sudden rush was triggered by an unexpected leak in their plans. A hostage named Carmen escaped, forcing their hand. With the truth out, Marek moves. He draws his sword, letting the blade gleam in front of her. What are you going to do? Parna asks, her voice trembling. He calmly answers that he's going to butcher this flesh monster before it wakes up. He starts to approach, but Parna desperately throws her hands up, screaming no. Don't do it. She watches him march toward the giant mass. He doesn't pause for a second, swinging his blade directly at the pulsing orb. Parna screams in absolute panic, trying to force him to stop. But as he strikes, sharp spikes suddenly burst out and pierce his hand. She screams to trigger the unstable awakening, watching in horror as the orb's mouth splits open. It exhales a heavy, agonizing sigh. Suddenly, the beast shrieks in sheer agony. Bursting right out of the orb, it shifts into a hideous, suffering mass of flesh. As it wails, Marek yells about the sacred relic hidden deep inside the beast. Without hesitation, the young priest grabs a strange object protruding from the flesh. He swings his blade, slicing it clean off. He quietly whispers about a new power. Blood splatters all over him, but he barely even registers the deep wound on his shoulder. Tossing the severed chunk aside, he ignores the pain completely. Marek stomps on it with pure rage, declaring the meatball will be their final offering. This drives Parna absolutely insane. She screams in fury at the chaotic turn of events. All her carefully laid plans are turning to ash right before her eyes. She rages about the system, completely unable to comprehend what is actually happening. But she cannot even finish her sentence. Marek swings, resting his cold blade against her neck. He calls it a simple punishment, standing there with absolute coldness. As Parna collapses to the ground, he immediately begins absorbing her divine energy. His total climbs to 8,592 units. He remembers absorbing the Lord earlier while spying on the cultists' conversations. A total of 10,000 units are required to unlock his next big power. And so the young priest keeps a very close eye on the forming beast. He quickly realizes that attacking this meatball directly will only cause its wounds to heal. Attacking blindly without a real plan is a quick way to get himself killed here. Marek takes a quick glance down at the bleeding wound on his own shoulder. Since this thing is just a giant ball of flesh with no obvious weak points, much like that Spider Queen, he only has one real option left. Gripping his sword tight, he takes a deep breath and readies himself. Then Marek bolts. He sprints away with every ounce of strength he has. The monster is completely stunned, watching its supposed prey suddenly bolt away. It opens its massive mouth, letting out a desperate shriek of pure misery. While running, Marek suddenly feels another wave of divine energy entering his body. Glancing back, he realizes he is only a tiny bit away from his goal. Running deeper into the ruins, he starts absorbing the leftover corpses of fallen villains. Each dead cultist grants him one precious unit of divinity to build his strength. He bursts out into the city streets, where dead bodies are scattered everywhere. Harvesting their energy one by one, he runs until he is fully charged. Meanwhile, the wailing meatball monster is hot on his heels, shrieking in agony. But Marek just keeps moving. Honestly, this is a pretty wild game of high-stakes tag. Either the beast catches up first, or he unlocks his ultimate power-up. The creature keeps charging after him, letting out ear-piercing shrieks. Its massive eye glows with an eerie light as it closes the gap alarmingly fast. Sensing the monster right behind him, Marek pushes himself to run even faster. But the flesh monster is relentless, launching itself forward in massive bounds. Every heavy leap shatters the paved ground, sending rocks and debris flying everywhere. Marek keeps sprinting, but he is forced to cover his ears from the noise. The monster's screech is so intense it literally feels like a living disaster. His muscles are burning with exhaustion, but he absolutely cannot stop now. He is completely exhausted and needs to dig deep. Stopping to rest, Marek spun around and glared furiously at his approaching foe. The monster lunged, thrusting its massive tentacles straight at the young priest. He barely managed to leap aside, desperately calling out to the mother of corruption. Suddenly, the monster shrieked in agony as its giant eye glowed pink. Sensing something looming above, it looked up sharply, still screaming in pain. Honestly, this beast has no idea what kind of absolute nightmare is coming next. A massive summoned giant came hurtling down, straight through the open portal. Slamming its massive body directly into the enemy, the giant did not hesitate. It clenched its massive hands into fists and brought them down furiously. The impact was so devastating that a massive cloud of dust completely blinded them. It likely crushed the beast deep into the shattered earth. To finish the job, Marnek's summon decided to deliver a final blow. It plunged a sharp spike directly into the beast's single eye, drawing blood. Sighing in relief that one giant summon was enough, Marnek stood watching. He quietly observed the total devastation and sweet victory playing out before him. Before leaving, Marnek warned his powerful ally not to go too wild. He promised to return shortly, then paused to think for a moment. He really needed more corpses to absorb that precious divinity. Realizing his best source of power would be elite knights, Marnek started running. He sprinted deep into the burning city as the wildfire spread rapidly. The flames swallowed everything in their path, turning living victims into charred skeletons. Turning onto the next street, Marnek spotted 2 fresh corpses on the ground. He deeply regretted wasting precious time instead of immediately consuming them. Marnek cursed himself for not taking the divinity sooner. Shielding his face from the intense heat, he bolted away from the flames. Counting the 9,237 units collected, he ran forward. He ran even harder, practically screaming in his desperate search for power. Marnek dashed headfirst into a collapsing building, hoping for a lucky find. But get this, what he actually finds inside completely freezes him in his tracks. He stood completely still, trying to figure out what was happening. A massive blast tore through the upper floors of the building. Shrapnel and debris rained down, completely turning the tables. The young priest crossed his arms to shield his face from the flying rubble. This was not just a simple explosion, something else was happening. It was the tentacles of the very monster he had fled from earlier. They tore right through the brick walls and surged directly inside. Marnek immediately raised his weapon to prepare for the oncoming strike. Clutching his heavy butcher blade tight, he braced for the incoming assault. With the heavy cleaver in hand, Marnek deflected every single tentacle flying at him. The wounded creature shrieked in absolute agony, swinging its limbs wildly in response. It reared back a massive fist, aiming a devastating blow right at Marnek. Within a split second, the colossal fist came crashing down on him. Dust filled the air, making the beast believe it had won. But things are not that simple, because Marnek is far from defeated. Marnek leapt forward, completely dodging the strike as the monster followed him. He needed to close the distance. Reaching a somewhat safe spot, Marek managed to spin around, raising his massive weapon while glaring directly at his enemy. Figuring the battle with the spoiled giant had empowered his foe, the young priest saw the newly evolved, terrifying body of his once weak opponent. The beast slowly stalked toward Marek, who stood perfectly still, showing absolutely zero fear. He clearly had no intention of running away, taking a few more strides forward. The evolved creature thrust its arm out, locking its single red pupil on him. Instantaneously, a swarm of dark, tentacle-like webs began erupting from its hand. Dozens of these writhing appendages shot through the air, heading straight for the priest. No retreat, Marek raised his weapon, ready to strike. He began swinging it furiously, shredding every single tentacle that flew his way. The monster was caught off guard, watching its own limbs explode into bloody chunks. Blood splattered everywhere as the young priest kept swinging his heavy blade. He pressed forward with his butcher blade, forcing the shrieking monster backward. Just as Marek closed the distance, the creature suddenly clenched its fist tightly. It pulled its hand back close to its face, preparing some kind of counterattack. Its second hand suddenly unleashed another massive wave of tentacles. Too fast, Marek could not parry them, and they wrapped tightly around him. A twisted smile spread across the monster's face as it trapped its prey. Time to play, with a sudden and violent jerk of its massive arm. The beast whipped its arm, sending the tentacles crashing down toward the earth. Slammed down, the impact hit with absolute bone-crushing force. The impact was incredibly devastating, instantly kicking up a massive cloud of thick dust. As the dust settled, our hero could barely draw a single breath. Struggling to speak, broken pieces of frozen earth dug into him. He weakly smiled at his mother's frantic warning, telling her he was fine. Still, Marek lay there, remembering his followers calling this place their battlefield. Dragging himself up and leaning heavily on his sword, the young priest noticed the fallen bodies of powerful soldiers scattered all around him. This sight confirmed exactly where this battle was taking place. The monster, still lurking inside the building, peered through a crack in the wall. It watched its stubborn opponent, who was somehow already back on his feet. Marek whispered a quiet prayer for Mother to take them all, scratching his head as the corpses surrounding him suddenly glowed with a bright green light. Instantly his divinity surged. Within seconds, his power skyrocketed straight to 10,000, and his expression completely hardened. This is the moment everything changes. The beast sensed this sudden, terrifying shift and began to tremble in fear. Terrified, all the creature could manage was a low whimper of pain, offering his entire 10,000 divinity to the mother of the spoil. Priest Marek became enveloped in an intense, mystical green aura. Power, he screamed for his transformation to begin. Standing tall, he threw his head back and laughed like a madman. He reveled in this newfound strength as he stood firm in his place. The ground beneath him began to wither, turning into a pitch-black void. Screaming in sheer agony, the monster watched its opponent become completely unstoppable. The giant scans the area with his lone red eye, sensing a strange chill. Seeing no immediate threat, he turns and spots the young priest standing right behind him. It is a terrifying sight that instantly sends him into a state of absolute panic. Marnak walks like a true victor, slowly closing in with his blade ready. He promises pain. Endless agony awaits the beast as he prepares to strike. With a fierce warning, Marnak steps closer and thrusts his sword forward. He waits, his hand will soon be marked with a dark new power. Enraged by this blatant disrespect, the monster clenches his fist in absolute fury. Dozens of writhing tentacles suddenly burst from his wrist, ready to attack. The corrupting energy of the decay pit is slowly consuming all life. Marnak knows this dark corruption will eventually consume his own body too. Marnak knows the risk. He must carefully manage this rapid decay. He plans to direct the corruption to less critical body parts first. The beast is terrified. It can barely muster a weak moan. His massive tentacle arm loses its grip, snapping off and crashing down. A dark grin spreads. Marnak silently watches the horrifying scene unfold. He silently watches the gruesome scene, thoroughly enjoying the thrill of battle. Marnak rests his blade over his shoulder, leaping high into the air. He challenges the beast to a race between its regeneration and his decay. Withstanding a barrage of relentless strikes, the crippled creature can barely stand. It begs for mercy. Marnak only drives his sword even deeper. He claims this victory in the name of the mother of corruption. A chunk of rotting flesh clings to his blade after that impact. He stands in absolute silence for a moment, letting the battle settle. Instantly, the bandaged hand pulls a small, glowing pink sphere directly into his palm. This corrupt relic previously belonged to the enemy, but now it is theirs. Marnak eagerly begs his goddess to break another seal on the strange object. The mother gently caresses the orb, causing its color to shift and change. Suddenly, it ignites. The relic bursts with a blinding flash of energy. Waves of vibrant light spread outward without causing any sort of explosion. Everything changes instantly. Marnak now holds a glowing purple orb. He stares at the sphere anxiously, whispering the name of his beloved goddess. As he cautiously scans the area, he notices something unexpected nearby. A silent silhouette stands ahead, quietly watching his every move. He stands frozen. He cannot take his eyes off the mysterious figure. Marnak stands completely dumbfounded, staring at what seems utterly impossible. Squinting through the dim light, he spots a shy girl in a torn dress with bandaged hands. She simply looks back at the young priest with a quiet, questioning gaze. He carefully studies her gentle face, wondering who she could possibly be. Could she actually be the physical manifestation of his own goddess? Marnak slowly steps closer, keeping his gaze locked on the silent child. She simply watches him back with the exact same quiet curiosity. Reaching out, he gently places his hand on her head, stroking her hair. She closes one eye in pure delight, leaning into his warm touch. This reaction confirms his guess, prompting him to ask why she chose a child's body. She makes a few clumsy attempts to walk, hearing him ask for permission. The girl lifts her deep, quiet eyes, staring back at the boy with silent curiosity. A flicker of hope guides his voice as he wonders if they can harvest divinity from another god, assuming it still lingers inside the fallen vessel. It would be an absolute waste to let all that raw power just fade away. The young priest points directly toward the defeated creature, lying cold nearby. The mother of spoil stretches out her tiny hands, ready to try. Squeezing her eyes shut to focus, a soft green light begins swirling around her. But pushing her limits is too much, and she drops to her knees, exhausted. Still, she keeps forcing it, drawing a soft chuckle from the young man. He tells her to take it easy and stop if it gets too difficult. Marek tries his best to calm her down and give her some encouragement. Before Marek can even explain how divinity blends and becomes inseparable, the young girl suddenly bolts right toward him and collapses into his arms. Feeling bad for her struggles, the priest gently pats the girl on the head. The mother of spoil looks back up at him, her eyes pooling with tears. But the relic has already broken the seal, gathering all the raw energy. With 10,000 divinity points secured, a bright green sphere of energy manifests in his palm. Offering it up as a gift, he extends his hand with the glowing orb. The sphere pulses, releasing a wave of pure magic. The relic surges to life, shooting upward to grant him brand new abilities. It expands to an unbelievable size, prepping him for the journey ahead. It slams back down, casting intense beams of magic in every direction. He smiles, genuinely curious about what this massive upgrade actually does. He wonders why the deity would grant him such an incredibly generous gift. The mother of spoil has returned, in a completely different body now. Yet her vocabulary is still limited to a single word, kill. He tries to figure out if her powers have any actual limits. They start walking down a lonely road, leaving the ruined battlefield behind them. As they travel, Marek can't stop thinking about the curse of spoil. He realizes this rot can easily decay everything within a town-wide radius. While he can consume demons and the dead for divinity, he absolutely refuses to harm innocent people just to harvest their power. He watches the little girl bounce happily ahead, keeping his resolve firm. He wonders how a sealed vessel could hold such holy influence. Suddenly, the shining sphere cracks open, drawing the young priest's attention. He looks at her, realizing none of this was a coincidence. Someone must have manipulated the mother's divinity to construct that exact monster. The mere thought gives him a massive headache, draining his energy rapidly. He barely has a second to process his worsening physical condition, before noticing the mother of spoil staring back at him with deep concern. But her gaze shifts instantly, turning around with a sudden surge of panic. She spots a strange, unsettling shadow lurking in the distance. His body simply can't handle the massive influx of divinity anymore. He collapses to the dirt, leaving the poor girl completely terrified. Pushing his body to its absolute limits, Marek was the last to see the mother of corruption. The goddess sat right above his closing eyes, quietly weeping for him, suddenly. Opening his eyes, the first thing he saw was his employer holding a small towel. He noticed him waking up and exhaled in relief as Marek lay on the bed. He looked like he had just died and returned to life, clutching at his heart. His eyes were wide open, utterly speechless. Suddenly, he sat bolt upright in bed, shouting at the top of his lungs, demanding to know where his belongings were. His sudden outburst completely startled the young man standing nearby, who tried to calm him. But the frantic priest refused to listen, completely ignoring his comrade's explanations. Instead, Marek kept shouting about his gear, completely consumed by an intense panic. He just wouldn't stop demanding to know exactly where his items had been kept. He needed to see them right this second, Marek kept screaming. And realizing this wouldn't end, Valtis quickly pulled out one of the items and held it out, the bandaged hand that Marek now cradled in his palms. Brought instant relief, washing away his terrifying fear of losing his goddess forever. Carmen smiled, noting how incredibly precious that strange object clearly was to him, explaining that while the others wanted to discard it, he had saved it. Valtis looked closely at the odd item again. Meanwhile, an overwhelming relief filled Marek's soul as he murmured his thanks, completely unsure of how to repay them. He placed a hand over his chest, deeply savoring the safe return of his goddess. Dismissing the heavy gratitude, Carmen casually scratched the back of his head. He acted incredibly humble, downplaying the entire thing with a warm, friendly smile. He admitted that without Marek's heroic sacrifice, he would have perished right there. Inside Kelton, which prompted a sudden question about where they were now. Carmen quickly explained their location, leading Marek to ask how long he had slept. He learned he had been completely out for about 10 days, as loud construction noises drifted in from the bustling street outside. When he asked about other survivors, the grim response was simple: Marek was the sole living soul left. Everyone else from the city was dead. Meanwhile, a man running down a snowy path takes a small dagger straight to the leg, collapsing into the snow with a painful scream. The sudden blow shatters his balance, sending him face first into the white powder, instantly staining the cold ground with fresh, hot blood. Behind him, more victims stumble forward in a single line, utterly terrified, battered, and bruised. They keep their heads low, scanning their bleak surroundings with pure dread. The source of all this terror is a ruthless, blue-haired priestess standing over them, with a drawn blade, looking completely ready to dish out more brutal violence. The wounded survivor on the ground screams in terror, begging for his life. But the priestess looks down at him like he is absolute garbage, coldly. Noting he cannot go any further, she raises her sword. Panicking, he desperately tries to prove his strength, begging for mercy while clasping his hands in prayer. Sobbing uncontrollably, his face is completely covered in tears and drool as he pleads. Ignoring his pitiful cries, she steps forward and swings her razor-sharp blade. Cleanly taking his head off, she quietly closes her eyes, praying to the sacred flame to consume the man's sins, as the headless corpse is instantly engulfed in fierce, roaring flames. The remaining prisoners can only watch in absolute horror. They averted their eyes, unable to watch the execution, knowing a similar fate could await them. With a cold, commanding tone, the blue-haired priestess ordered the prisoners to march. She turned around, glaring with pure anger at every single survivor left standing. Bound and terrified, none of them dared disobey as they stepped forward. They silently marched in a long line, following her absolute commands without question. Nobody dared break formation, knowing the fierce priestess held absolute control right behind them. She kept her sharp sword drawn. Meanwhile, a guard listened with utter confusion. He could not understand why these bandits actually wanted to turn themselves in. One battered prisoner, covered in bruises, snot, and tears, stepped out of line. He loudly wailed, confessing that they belonged to the notorious Snow Bear bandits. Falling to his knees, he and the others desperately begged the guard to imprison them. They begged for a locked cell, anything to avoid a brutal public execution. Standing nearby, the priestess quietly confirmed that jail was indeed what they wanted. They literally begged to be locked up. Then, the guard started to speak. Smiling, he mentioned that Lord Kelton was ready to pay for their bounty. Meeting her cold, questioning gaze, the guard instantly fell silent. He explained that Lord Kelton was killed by a dark follower, meaning they must wait. It would take 2 days to get the bounty, but her expression suddenly shifted. When she asked about those dark followers, the guard mentioned the priest, Marek. He said Marek and his summoned beast had slept for 10 straight days. They fought a fierce battle, and this young priest had actually slain the demon. Hearing that he defeated the demon Geza, the priestess stared in absolute shock. She demanded to know who really defeated the evil spirit and his followers. Asking if this mysterious savior was still in Kelton, her blue eyes gleamed. Meanwhile, a group of lively companions approached a nearby local tavern, celebrating. They wanted to raise a glass and toast to their incredible victory. Inside, a curious voice asked a tipsy patron who truly defeated the evil. He wanted to know where the heroic priest Marek was hiding right now. Hearing Marek's name, the entire tavern erupted into a loud, joyous cheer. They kept shouting his name, leaving the blue-haired priestess to listen in silence. The cheers echoed through the streets, and even those outside joined the shouting. Everyone called out the hero's name. Meanwhile, the man himself was already gone. Marich was currently on horseback with his close companion, riding far away. Escaping the chaotic town, he silently recalled a crucial piece of information. The priest Marich kept moving forward, never once looking back at the city. He remembered what was said about the intense interest of that priestess. Trine had warned him about her, hailing from the temple of the sacred flame. After learning the whole truth, the weight of her search hit him hard. Hearing that the priestess was actively hunting him triggered a deep, instinctual sense of alarm. Knowing her immense power, he anxiously wondered if she recognized his true nature. His blood ran cold when he recalled how uncertain she was about him. But there was absolutely no doubt that she would eventually track him down. The master of Giza looked at his savior with a cold, unsettling calmness. Still, Marich spurred his horse forward, pushing his companion to ride even faster. He knew that staying in Kelton any longer would be complete and utter madness. His employer rode with him, but Valtis still could not grasp why they fled so quickly. They fled so quickly, Marnak remembered she was easily the strongest. She was insanely strong, even the mother of spoil. Valued her at 4.5 fingers, Marnak thanked his companion. For agreeing to leave immediately, the young master expressed his deep gratitude. He wanted to slip away quietly, preferring to leave before drawing any unwanted attention. They had to avoid Kelton. Valtis was still completely confused. He did not get the rush. 2 weeks later, they walked through a frozen forest. They strolled along quietly, talking casually with absolutely no rush. They took their time. Suddenly, Carmen noticed a familiar sight. He guessed it was the crest of the noble Iram family. A grand carriage sat up ahead, completely surrounded by guards. It carried someone highly important. That was when Marnek asked if this carriage actually belonged to the legendary Supreme Lord of the Southern Lands. His employer stared ahead and quietly gave a brief nod. The white flower seal visible on the carriage door confirmed it. It was definitely the noble crest, matching all of Carmen's assumptions. Ready to greet them politely, Marnak and his partner walked forward. They stepped up, though Valtis saw no reason to bow without a lord's flag. Assuming the carriage only held some distant relative or a child, they paused. Carmen decided it was best to pass by without causing a scene. They kept moving, the carriage rolled along as they walked on. Neither side made any attempt to look or draw unwanted attention. But just as they safely crossed paths, a sudden sensation hit Marnak hard. An alarm blared in his head like a sudden crack of thunder. Noticing his sudden, tense reaction, Valtis turned around to ask what happened. Marnak quietly whispered back that someone was bound and gagged inside. Stunned by this sudden revelation, Valtis could barely mask his absolute shock. He glanced back, instantly catching the attention of the surrounding guards. With hostile glares, the escorts instantly drew their sharp steel blades. They looked ready to butcher these fools for not minding their own business. The leader screamed a death order, telling his men to slaughter them both. The entire pack of mercenaries swarmed Marnak and his partner from every side. They lunged in perfect unison, throwing the entire snowy path into utter chaos. A blinding flurry of steel followed, until a severed head rolled onto the snow. A headless corpse, the rest of the attackers froze in absolute horror. Their eyes bulged in absolute terror, unable to process the sudden carnage. One of the remaining soldiers screamed in outrage at their horrific fighting style. He stared at his dead comrade, completely terrified by the brutal counterattack. The guards backed away as Marnak and Valtis kept casually swinging their swords. They sliced through the air without even bothering to look at their targets. Only 8 opponents remained. The dark priest calmly assessed the battlefield. Back to back they stood. Suddenly, the carriage door swung wide open. A nobleman stepped out of the carriage, furious about the sudden disruption. He demanded that they halt this madness at once. In response, the bald man. The bandit leader barks at his men, calling them fools for being afraid. They only have to face 2 guys, so they need to hurry before time runs out. That is all the motivation they need. The entire gang charges from all directions. But the 2 friends do not flinch, only gripping their weapons tighter. Still they wait. Baldy screams another curse, pointing at the closest target. He lunges forward with fury, ready to deliver a single, lethal blow. But before he can even swing, a sudden flash catches his eye. An arrow flies straight through the air, sinking right into the middle of his forehead. The bandit drops instantly, face planting into the dirt, right in front of the archer. Carmen lowers his bow. Suddenly, a strange, wet gagging sound echoes from nearby. Startled by the noise, Carmen turns around to find out what is happening. He is stunned to see his partner, looking incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. Wait, who is that actually bent over, retching on the grass? Marek gently pats the stranger's back, offering a wry smile as Carmen asks for a name. He jokes that they probably picked the worst possible time for introductions. Marek admits he has no clue what toxin is paralyzing her body. He looks up at Carmen, who nods back in quiet understanding. Those distinct golden eyes practically scream that she belongs to the noble Ermel family. Suddenly, a sharp voice snaps, telling them to stop hitting her back. Finally finished, the girl stands up straight and offers a formal thank you. She introduces herself as the eldest daughter of Kalto Ermel. Stepping forward, she locks her gaze onto the two companions. Her bright golden eyes shine as she gives her name Daya. Carmen leans over to Marek, whispering a quick doubt about her identity. Honestly, can you blame the guy for staring in complete disbelief? His voice trembles with excitement as he realizes who she really is. A high-class mage from a prestigious noble house is standing right here. He calculates how useful she could be, staring so hard she gets uncomfortable. She frowns back at him. Carmen whispers a sarcastic remark to Marek. He jokes about Daya's massive ego, completely unaware she is watching them. Daya glares at them with deep suspicion, letting out a loud cough. She demands to know the name of her savior, recognizing his priest attire. Smiling, Marek confirms he is indeed a priest serving the support goddess. He introduces himself warmly, hoping to establish a good connection. Laughing in approval, Daya offers her hand to the surprised priest. She clearly wants a proper introduction, setting aside her noble pride. A moment later, she asks for help, admitting she still cannot move. The lingering effects of the poison are keeping her limbs completely frozen. She inhaled a sleeping gas earlier, and the paralysis has not faded yet. Seeing her tremble, the archer steps forward to help. He introduces himself as Carmen, the son of Anthony Valtis. But as he reaches out, Daya stops him with a curious question. She wonders if it is wise for them to be seen together. Being associated with a member of the Black Wild Dogs could start rumors. Carmen instantly blushes, completely embarrassed by her blunt but honest concern. Even surrounded by dangerous noble factions, the girl admits she just wanted a little warmth, sparking a sudden wave of genuine empathy in our protagonist, Daisha. Seeking answers, Daisha turns to Marek, searching his face with a look that stirs a strange, entirely unfamiliar emotion deep down inside his chest. He and Carmen just stand there, completely speechless and frozen in absolute shock. They cannot wrap their heads around how a highborn mage can be this incredibly kind. Staring with faces that scream pure confusion rather than understanding, they look at the girl who calmly waits for them to finally find their words. Breaking the tense silence, Carmen speaks up, asking the obvious question. How exactly did a highborn lady like her end up getting kidnapped, anyway? She starts explaining, relying more on her raw instincts than hard evidence. T completely holds Marek captive as he hangs onto every single word. She reveals that this entire plot was engineered by her own hateful brother. Then she drops the name of the absolute monster who arranged it all, Durso. Just saying his name makes her shrink back, crossing her arms tightly in discomfort. Even the mere memory of this man makes her skin crawl. This shocking family betrayal takes Carmen completely by surprise. He steps closer, eager to hear the rest of her dark story. She explains that Durso is using a Dragon Kingdom marriage proposal to exploit her high royal status as Ares and permanently discard her like trash. This dirty trick makes our protagonist roll her eyes, thinking of her own family. It seems noble families are toxic no matter where you go in this world. Carmen hangs his head in deep sympathy, recognizing the shared, painful burden. You see, the nobility hates mages because they fear that awakening magic represents a massive, unpredictable crisis for their carefully controlled bloodlines. First, they absolutely despise the classic personality traits that define almost every mage. They are notoriously wild, uncontrollable, and completely ignore traditional rules of behavior. Basic manners are lost on them, replaced by massive egos and power. Giving authority to someone so chaotic is a recipe for absolute disaster. The second reason is rooted in chilling tales of ancient history. Stretching back to the chaotic times before the current empire rose, dark legends of mad mages running completely wild have been passed down. Through generations of noble bloodlines, terrifying rulers with ancient horrors. Almost everyone believes these myths, keeping mages far away from power. As they roast food over a crackling evening campfire, T shares her true dream. She secretly wants to become one of the 4 legendary lords of the North. It is a cozy, quiet moment of true bonding under the stars. She insists she will never resort to killing her own brother. This peaceful resolution deeply intrigues Marek, sparking hope in his eyes. But T, admitting she has told this tale multiple times, brings a beautifully mischievous, teasing smirk straight to Daisha's face. This makes Marek chuckle awkwardly in complete and utter embarrassment. Sighing heavily, the distraught girl asks if they are even paying attention to her. To prove it, they quickly repeat everything she said about the dragon marriage, being a cheap excuse to sell her out to the giant beasts. Carmen Valtis nodded in confirmation, fully proving their theories. She cast a serious glance at the archer, while the young man behind them laughed, trying to explain that they only wanted to catch every detail. As she went on explaining this story for the 3rd time, Marek smiled. He quietly hoped she would realize how hard it was to pay attention. Every single time, he then brought up the meat that had burned while that story was being told, trying to ease the tense atmosphere. To make up for her disappointment, he offered to trade his food, which quickly brought a grateful smile to the girl's face. With a gentle chuckle, the young man hoped things would go much better next time, warning her that chatting while cooking was always risky. The joke did not amuse Hermes' eldest daughter, who glared back with furrowed eyebrows right at him, but a moment later, she quietly asked for their help. Sitting right beside her, Marek guessed her request immediately. Dakia wanted to be escorted to Battis, the land of the Mal family. It was completely expected, but her offer of gold, weighing as much as his own body, was spoken with absolute seriousness, without a single trace of any jest. The immense generosity of the High Lord's family made her a dream client, but a quick glance toward Carmen Valtis showed that his heavy thoughts overshadowed the exciting moment. He realized they would have to delay searching for Valtis's mother if he agreed to escort the lady. The young man looked at his companion carefully, seeking his approval, pondering the thought of a fortune that could burn them all. The young man listened to her words in pure, utter disbelief. He simply could not believe such ridiculous suggestions of overeating, failing to understand how a mere love for gold could make him so incredibly fat. Marek continued to argue heatedly with the divine entity, clenching his fist tight. The archer suddenly spoke up, accepting the heavy responsibility of interfering, swearing to carry this burden to the very end as a proud Vus. By the next morning, after the 3 of them had traveled a massive distance, the protagonist stopped in his tracks and pointed sharply at a village up ahead. With a sudden burst of energy, they hurried closer to the settlement while the girl quietly dreamed of taking a long-awaited hot bath, arriving in town. And checking into a small room, Marek dropped his pack onto the floor next to the Lord's daughter, who stared back with wide eyes. Approaching his companions, Valtis smiled and pointed out their rooms at the very end of the 3rd-floor hallway, warmly letting them know that the hot bathwater was already fully prepared. Agreeing to wash up fast and head out together, he saw the bright smiles on his friends' faces, showing their absolute agreement with the plan. Gasping in absolute delight at the sight of the hot food, Dakia admired the feast, while Marek only sighed deeply, wishing he could finally regain his sense of taste. Sitting down to eat, the protagonist heard a sudden shout from outside, and before he could even process it, he whipped his head toward the source of the noise. The frantic screams of a young waitress serving a table of 3 men, one of whom was actively harassing her, instantly drew the attention of everyone in the room. Walking over to the rowdy table, the hotel staff politely asked the man not to make a scene, desperately hoping to resolve this quietly. But the drunkard just glares back with pure rage, completely ignoring him.